All right, I think we're live. So good evening, everybody. So as we come online here, I'll cover a few things at the beginning here. Um, so I know there's probably going to be a number of people that are at this moment struggling, hurting, probably. The goal would be that we bring some clarity to the recent events of James River Church leaving the Assemblies of God. And so I think this audio recording from that event, we get to look back and have a little bit clearer picture of what went down that night. So I will jump to the presentation here and we'll get started. I want to cover some scriptures first before we get too far into it. So I think here we go. There. All right. So I think a good question to ask is, hey, do we have a biblical mandate for, addressing sin publicly? Is this a good thing, or should we just kind of, be quiet about this? So, and what you'll see here is you'll see that the Bible is pretty clear that we're supposed to restore, hold accountable, and protect the church. And so, number of scriptures I'll use here real quick is confront sin for restoration, right? So Matthew 18:15 through 17. So confronting privately first is a great solution. Now, with public sin, I don't think it's required, but it's a great way to handle it, because then you can address the person one-on-one and you don't have to air it out in public. Now, if it's a public sin, I think the person, if you address it with them, should consider addressing and repenting publicly for the sin, right? Then with one witness, and then finally before the church. If repentant, public sin may require immediate public action. So that's been kind of the reason I felt really encouraged by the Word of God to speak on some of these issues that I've witnessed. Public rebuke for public sin is definitely in the Bible. It talks about this here in 1 Timothy 5:19 through 20. Substantiated sin in elders requires public reproof to deter others. So there's a benefit to that. Matter of fact, I believe Pastor John Lindell, maybe a few months ago or a little while ago, spoke exactly on that the public rebuke is to create fear in others so they don't do the same. I'm not necessarily trying to create fear here, but I think calling out the truth is important, and it will hopefully bring our churches into better alignment with Scripture and obedience with that. So pastors face stricter judgment is what the Bible says there in James 3:1. For those that I've got a number of criticisms here. I just want to show this real quick. For those that are new, maybe haven't seen any of my posts, or very few, you'll see that I've reached out to John Lindell, Kurt Parsley, Brandon, David, Josh Longenecker, multiple times to many of them, maybe not all of them, but many of them. So these gentlemen have received communication from me and concern about some of the doctrine from Bethel, about some of the stories that I've received, and I didn't go public with. I just wanted to talk to them about it, and they've essentially given me no response. So it's kind of sad to not hear back from people that care to say they care about the flock. I'm sure, but they've acted like I'm an outsider, I guess, and I don't deserve a response. But you've got Brandon, and this is multiple different ways. So I've gone through Messenger and through text messages. So I just want to be clear that I have tried to communicate that with them, and maybe not at the very beginning because it was public stuff that was going on, but I've definitely communicated with them since then. So exposing public sin also is we can talk about leadership qualifications. Pastors must be above reproach. Unrepentant sin disqualifies them to protect the flock. So a couple of scripture verses about that. And like I said, we'll get started here in a few minutes. I told you guys I'd go over some scripture that'll guide us. I think it's really important that it's just not a matter of fact. My goal tonight is I've given a lot of my opinion, hopefully tied to the facts, or evidence, I should say. But the goal tonight is not just to simply provide you a bunch of my opinion. I would like to guide us along in a. It's going to take a bit, probably a few hours to do this, and I think it will be very helpful for those that are really trying to heal and understand what happened. So, and I can see your questions and I can see your comments. So, thanks so much for if you're liking it, that's helpful too. It does help more people see and know what we're talking about. So, well, like I said, I'll get into the audio recording here in a minute. So that we talked about leadership qualifications, protecting the church, right? Galatians 2:11-14 says Paul publicly corrected Peter's hypocrisy. I'm not claiming I'm Paul. I got in a little flack for quoting this, but I'm saying, Paul's a great example of a biblical leader, and he did use this public calling out of Peter. So unrepentant leaders must be confronted to preserve the gospel and preserve integrity in our churches. Let's go back to that. Very sorry. All right, and then I got just a few more slides, and we'll pray before we get started here. Okay. So we also want to approach with humility, Galatians 6:1, Ephesians 5-11, and confront gently. And I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not done this all perfectly. There's been a number of times where what I've learned and what I've seen has angered me and frustrated me and caused me to probably not act in the most godly way. I think if we're all being honest, that can happen at times, and we need to repent of that. We need to try to correct that and bring ourselves under biblical ways to address concern. And I would say that tonight, for most of us what I'm going to show you is probably going to anger a lot of you, and that's probably a decent response to what you're going to learn and see. Especially because, like I said, we're looking back in time at something now we can really see play out. And so being angry is probably a normal response. We're going to have lots of different sadness. I know some of you are dealing with sadness because, you feel betrayed. I know a lot of you are, I get a lot of private messages. People are having difficulty finding like a new, they feel like they got to go to a new church. It's like a breakup, right? It's a divorce. So, you've invested years and years and years at James River Church. And so this has been a difficult thing to address and move on from. So I'm sympathetic to that. My wife and I didn't take this lightly when we left. And I'm sure the people that have left since, Bill Johnson probably initially coming, that was kind of a key moment, I believe. They would all say you come to it, your understanding at your own time, and then it's a difficult, long process because you're going to give grace to people, hopefully, right, and not just jump at the first frustrating moment. So before we get started here, you're going to see some practical steps, right? It says verify sin with a witness, confront privately if possible, rebuke publicly if needed, remove unrepentant pastors from leadership, and then prioritize the church's spiritual health. All right, so how do we do this in love? It's really interesting that truth and love are inseparable. So we can't separate these two. It's really important that we keep them together. I'm going to really try to keep that tone tonight, although it's sobering and saddening to hear the meeting and see what happened. I want to be as loving, but I have to share the truth here, okay? So I'm going to speak in love to honor God and seek other spiritual good. What's the good I'm seeking? The good of the church in general, and all of these people that are suffering that are logging on right now. So we want to seek that good. We want to prioritize God's approval, not human acceptance, right? Rejoicing in truth, not trying to get the acceptance of man. Be courageous and yet compassionate. So correcting with patience and mercy. A couple more things and we'll pray. We want to follow Christ's example. We want to confront sin while offering grace. We want to share the truth, right, with gentleness and respect. We want to pray for wisdom, check our motives, right? Because our motives can be impure. They could be for our own gain. They could be for we want to be right rather than really just stand on truth. Now, I will say this: the right thing is always the right thing. I think that's a common theme that I try to lead by in our office, but I think that's where some people struggle. Is the right thing usually costs you something, and so. If you only do the right thing when it doesn't cost you anything, then you're not really committed to doing the right thing. Does that make sense? So I'm just saying the right thing's the right thing. This is definitely addressing something that was very wrong. So we're going to pray for wisdom. We're going to check our motives, and we're going to be patient. I think I'll methodically go through this and not try to just create a bunch of emotion. I want us to think through what happened and develop your own. I think I can guide, but I think asking you questions and getting some of your feedback, I think will be very helpful. So, and we want to model truth and love here. Okay. So let me just say that before we go to prayer, please, in the comment section, let's stay away from name calling. You know, I would be very careful to be aggressive, making, you know, especially with each other. I would try to, if you're going to make points, I would always try to be polite, kind. Things are lost in text. That's why video is so important. It's one reason I'm doing this live, because you know, there's a value to live video versus pre-recorded or text and no personality, no tone. And so be mindful of that when you're in the chat. Let's try to keep this at least edifying. There's a purpose here that we should honor, and that's protecting the church, correcting truth in love, or correcting sin in love with truth. Okay. All right. Dear Heavenly Father, we just come to you tonight. We pray that you would just give us discernment, give us wisdom, help us to see the truth of this situation. Help us to learn from this issue and apply it to future churches. God, I pray that this message would go far beyond James River, because this is an issue across our country of removing accountability and power. And God, I just pray that you would help us to use wisdom as we watch this video, as we listen to the words, and we assess what really happened. God, I pray that we would check our motives at the door, that we would come into this with just wanting to know truth, wanting to learn how we can better serve you in our churches, have better accountability structures so that our churches honor you. And God, we just lift up the idea, God, that we would come tonight with this conviction to be truthful, but also loving. God, we pray for John and Debbie. We pray for James River Church. We know that there's a lot going on there, Father, that you understand, while many of us do not understand. And I pray for them. I pray they would hear this message. I pray that they would listen, and that it would convict their heart what has gone on. I pray that they would repent, and I pray that they would turn back to you on this, because I believe the evidence is going to be pretty hard for them. God, I pray that you would just help us as we are searching for our churches, God, that we would uphold our pastors and our leaders with prayer, that we would choose churches that have godly accountability structures that preserve your bride. So we just thank you so much for this evening. Thank you for all that are on the chat. I pray that you just bless them. Thank you for it in your name. Amen. All right, let's jump into it, guys. So one of the key criticisms that we get, right, and I know that I think even John did this maybe even last week, but the key criticism is, hey, you know, if you have a problem, go to the pastor, and then, you know, take one with you, Matthew 18, right, and then you go to the church, and the church is not the internet. And I want you to know that the dogging on internet and social media, yes, it's valid in the sense that people can be really hateful behind a computer. And so there's an issue with that, but the internet is the town square, so to speak, right? We do life there. So, matter of fact, James River does life there. And so I wanted you to hear from John, just because I think this is a criticism your family, people that go there, they've heard from him multiple times. It's like, hey, social media is a joke, right? You don't want to go on there. It's all just trash. And so they're using that to try to discredit any of the points that I would want to make or others would want to make about the false doctrine and some of the behavior. Okay, so I'm going to play this really quick. And by the way, I'm going to do a setup after this of kind of the story, because I know some people have followed this really well, and then some haven't. So we'll do a setup, and then we'll get into the audio. So that'll be soon, and we'll go through the whole thing. It's about an hour-long audio, and I got a few times where I'll obviously stop. All right.
Say this, I take issue with everybody who goes online and does this stuff, and here's why.
YouTube, Facebook, James River's homepage, James River app, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So you are welcome to share it, and we'd encourage you. We're also going to be emailing and texting it.
Put it on the internet, get it on Facebook, get it on. No. You tell it to the church. And the church is not the internet. We are calling you to publicly repent for refusing to stop the spread of lies regarding Alex Magala, a Christian brother. And the church is not the internet. To those who follow Mark Driscoll Ministries, in light of what has been presented, you should reconsider your relationship and support of Mark Driscoll Ministries. I'll say this, I take issue with everybody who goes online and does this stuff, and here's why. To those who have passed on information from social media and other sources that tonight has been shown to be false, you too need to repent. And the church is not the internet. And not just before God, that is certainly where it starts, but repent by going to those with whom you have shared false information and set the record straight. I'll say this, I take issue with everybody who goes online and does this stuff, and here's why. Doing it through the same manner and with the same platforms as you spread the false information. I think it's biblically tragic and possibly sinful to air church differences of opinion in front of unbelievers on the internet. It's tragic.
And I want to encourage you, if you'd like to share this message, it will be posted by tomorrow morning on YouTube, Facebook, James River's homepage, James River app, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So you are welcome to share it, and we'd encourage you. We're also going to be emailing and texting it.
And the church is not the internet.
All right. So we get the point there. Like this is they use the internet to put a lot on about that was actually confronting Mark Driscoll. I don't know if you guys remember that a year ago, calling him out and using the internet, obviously, to convey that message across the country, paying for advertisement, putting it on all of the social media streams and podcasts, and then encouraging people to email and text. So I think that and they were doing that really as a PR campaign to cover up this men's conference. And so, and there's a lot of lies in that message. So I don't want to dwell on that, but my point in showing is do not feel guilty. I've had so many people reach out saying you shouldn't be sharing these posts on the internet. It's just you're sinful if you're doing that. I would say that doesn't make any sense. Like we should be salt and light wherever we are. And truth and love is important. That's what I'm saying. Be loving in your comments. That would be a good start. So let's get into it. I think that kind of sums it up where I wanted the intro. Sorry, it took a bit there, but the audio recording, I have this recording. How did I get it? I had a gentleman that had recorded it for his wife. Shocked he had it, but was encouraged by the stand and some of the stand information I've shared. And so he reached out to me Saturday afternoon with this audio file. So I've cleaned it up. I've added captions. And then we have some, like I said, going back and looking at it, knowing that the James River Church left the AG and how this was accomplished is very enlightening. So I think it'll be very informative for those that are watching. You'll get quite a bit out of this, and it won't take too long. It's an hour-long audio file, but in the first 10 to 15 minutes is where the most of it happens as far as the AG stuff. So the ultimate purpose is to edify the church here. What do I mean by that? We want to help the church grow healthy-wise, right? We want to keep it healthy. Accountability structures, right? Where there's some sort of governance that has some representation from the church is very healthy. When we remove that, now we just really have a business, right? So quick background on the facts and timeline. I'm going to give you that. We're going to present the facts that are, about how it looks very deceitful, where there might be sinful behavior. There's definitely some unlawful actions that happened. Now, I would say this, I'm not confident on all who knew, right? So when we're going through this, there's definitely some things where we're way out of line. And it's hard to know. I mean, obviously you're going to hear the speakers, but it's hard to know who all knew. I will tell you this, I've had a number of board members that I am confident had no clue. And I've heard from them. And so what happened this night, I think very few of even the leadership was confident on how this orchestration was. It's an incredibly timed orchestration. Another thing you need to know, I'm going to talk very confidently about what I know about this situation, not because I am an attorney. I have sought counsel and I understand this very clearly, and there's case law. So this is something that has played out already in the state of Missouri, and we have an almost exact replica of this case, okay? So what happened here has already been litigated, and I'm not advocating, for litigation. I mean, that's really up to the AG and members of the church. I just think it shows I can be confident when I'm telling you what happened and how they were able to accomplish what they did. And I don't know all the levels of intentionality. None of us do, right? That's for them to settle with God. I will take questions throughout. That's probably not true a ton because I want to get through it, but I'm by myself, so I might not be able to do that. I'm going to invite responses. I want healthy discussion and debate. Give you the full analysis of the articles in agreement, which is really important. I'm going to give you a few things here in just a second that you're going to want to write down or at least make really good mental note of. And we're looking back at a significant moment in time, right? So everything hinges on this night. So this night, this audio recording is when the church made the dramatic change that allowed for what you saw 3 weeks ago, okay? So this night is what really accomplished it. Let's see. We will look. Yeah, the irrefutable case law. Like I said, I'm confident this represents exactly what we're looking at. And then what the conclusion is for. And then, by the way, this case law is in the state of Missouri. And one of the judges that ruled on this in the appellate, there was a 3-0 appellate decision. He's a Supreme Court judge. So there's no doubt that the Missouri Supreme Court judge that ruled in this case that I'm going to share is very aware of how boards and chairmen of the boards can accomplish this maneuver, and it's not lawful. Okay. So some things you need to know here is this. These are important legal definitions, right? So articles of incorporation, and I'm learning all this stuff too. So if you're like, how do you know all this? I'm learning a lot of this because I just, I'm a dentist. So articles of incorporation, legal document filed with the state to create a corporation outlining its purpose, name, structure, and key provisions. Okay, so that's a definite difference. It's the most formal component. It's sent to the state or it's approved in a court. So then there's this constitution, right? Constitution and bylaws. Those are internal documents. They're foundational document establishing the principles, structure, governance, organizational entity, often broader in scope, and then internal rules governing organization or bylaws, right? So all three of these are discussed in this meeting and in this order. So that'll keep it pretty straight. This is a key article. Write this one down. Article 9. It's a very important article. I'll cover it in detail. But if you don't understand this article, you'll miss a lot of what's going on here. Okay. So what is this Article 9? It's called a protectionary provision. That's one way to phrase it. But this one is talking to counsel. This is some of the craziest, most locked up protectionary provision they've ever seen. It requires 100% vote to amend any of the articles of agreement. So we talked earlier about these. The articles of agreement are articles of incorporation. Those are the same thing, by the way. So 100% vote to amend any of the articles of agreement, like church membership, which was article number 7, and affiliation, article number 4. So you're going to want 9, 7, and 4. 9 is the protectionary provision. 7 is the church membership, describes church membership in the articles. And then the affiliation is going to be how James River Church is organized relative to the Assemblies of God. It ensures these core elements remain unchanged unless every member agrees, right? That's pretty substantial. It safeguards the church. So this is important, guys. Why do this? It safeguards the church, its foundational identity, beliefs, or affiliations by preventing amendments without unanimous consent, preserving stability and unity on critical issues. So pretty interesting. So here's a question I'd ask you, right? Is there any way to get 100% of people to agree on anything, right? It's pretty hard, right? This is at the time of this meeting, I think John says something like there was 5,000 members. So just ask yourself, right? Can you get 5,000 members to agree on anything? And then if you're asking yourself that, then why would the founders of James River Church put in such a rigid article like Article 9, right? So if it's so rigid and you can't get 100% of people to agree, why would you put it in there? I will tell you it's because they don't want you to change any of the articles that it protects. Make sense? So it's kind of like a lock on those articles saying, good luck, you're going to have to get 100% of the people to agree on this to amend those articles. So that's what this Article 9 is. That's how they wrote it. There's your Article 7. There's the church membership. You'll see that it says active members of the corporation shall include the board of trustees and those persons that do qualify under the bylaws and corporation. Membership shall be evidenced by this roster that's kept by the secretary. And then the members who are in a class entitled to vote shall be listed as one vote. Okay, so you can see that as Article 7. This is all from the Secretary of State website. Article 4, you'll see is the affiliation article. And here's a screenshot of that. But this article talks about how this is kind of amazing, right? So this affiliation article is an extremely strong article. I will show you these multiple times. I will not read them all every time, but I want you to see how strong this one is. Okay, so this is the Assemblies of God throwing, like, I believe this was copied and pasted over, right? This is not something that maybe was written by the founders, maybe, but my guess is that this is Assemblies of God moving it into their James River's initial articles. But it makes sense, right? You're building a church off of the idea that you are Assemblies of God and you align with that doctrine. So there's going to be people that come to your church, give to missions, do building campaigns, invest their life, invite their friends, right? Because it has this affiliation. So the Assemblies of God's basically saying here, if you're going to give that affiliation and you're going to use that to attract people to build your church, you can't just 10, 15 years down the road go, peace, we're out, right? You just can't do it because, and if you do, it's our assets, right? We get the properties. So you'll see how this is written. And I'm going to read it off this screen here. It's a little easier for me. If termination of affiliation with the Southern Missouri District Council of the Assemblies of God or the General Council of the Assemblies of God is under consideration by the membership of the board of directors of this corporation, the pastor or the board of directors shall invite the district superintendent, assistant district superintendent, secretary, treasurer, and sectional presbyter. So what is this saying? It's saying if you want to terminate your affiliation, you're going to have to you have to notify them and invite all of these people to participate in a specially called business meeting, right? So not an annual business meeting, but a specially called business meeting for the express purpose of giving this officiary the right to present why you don't want to leave the Assemblies of God. So that's a pretty strong deal, right? They're throwing in this, hey, let us come and convince people that you shouldn't be able to leave. So let's hear from, I believe this is Don Miller, but let's hear from this gentleman and ask yourself, did he get any notification at all? Right? Here, let's hear from him.
On Monday, April 21st, I received a copy of the letter addressed to General Superintendent Doug Clay from Pastor John Lindell of James River Church. In that letter, John stated their intentions to disaffiliate from the Assemblies of God. Our leadership met at length at that moment with Superintendent Doug Clay that afternoon as Superintendent Clay came to my office. I then met in person with John, Brandon, and David Lindell. Last Wednesday morning, they announced the decision to their staff, and on Wednesday night, evening, and then last Sunday, they announced the decision to their body that they were separating from the Assemblies of God. All along the way, we have kept our network leadership apprised. We are grieved and brokenhearted about this action. And this is complex in many more ways than many of you could even possibly perceive.
So pretty clear that this was a surprise, right? I mean, you could tell that they were not notified at all. So this is if there's a split decision to leave the AG, right? So here's what happens if it goes to a vote after the church gets a chance to talk to the Assemblies of God officiary, and they go, you know what? 80% of us want to leave, 20% of us don't. Let's say it's 100 people still want to stay. Well, the 100 people that want to stay, it says right here, Council of the Assemblies of God and or General Council of the Assemblies of God, then all property of the corporation and the church shall remain with those members, whatever their number. So desiring to continue this affiliation. So if it's a split decision, the property stays with those who want to stay in the Assemblies of God. What if 100% of the people go, you know what, we're done with the Assemblies of God and let's leave? Well, then the Assemblies of God in this disaffiliation from the church disaffiliating gets all of the assets and they can liquidate them. Okay, so right here it says, if all the members of the corporation shall vote to disaffiliate from the Assemblies of God for doctrinal or any other reasons, or should the corporation ever cease to be affiliated with the good standing of the Southern District Council or the AG, of the AG or the General Council of the AG, then the corporation shall be dissolved and liquidated in accordance with the provisions of Article 8, which is just another provision for that. Okay. All right. So here's a good question. You guys go ahead and type it out here. Why would the founders of James River Church put in such a rigid article like Article number 4 that requires that the church essentially always be AG or the assets go back to the AG? Why would the founders of James River Church protect Article 4 with this Article number 9, which remember is the protectionary provision? I think those are interesting questions. Seems very intentional, right? All right, so we're about ready to jump in, but I want to introduce you to some resolutions that made a difference on that night. And by the way, once we get into the audio, we'll get clipping along. But I know there's some that are getting into this, and they maybe aren't familiar with what happened that night. And so if we just jump into it and you don't know what the articles are, you know what the resolutions are, you're going to get confused pretty quick, right? So I want to try to make this as clear as possible so we can all benefit from this time. Okay, so resolutions on June 19th. So this is that meeting they had on the evening of June 19th. Resolution number 1 was the Articles of Incorporation, right? That's what they were talking about during this one. Resolution 2 was addressing the Constitution, and Resolution 3 was addressing the bylaws. So here's the minutes from that night. So they go along with the audio, right? Because those are the recorded minutes from this evening. And you'll see that, and I'll have to look over here again. We're talking about the amendment, resolution 1 is Articles of Agreement. And I'm going to ask, there's some of you that are maybe a little bit more in tune. You're going to figure out where things went off the rails pretty quick. Okay, so let me read this to you. Resolution 1 was read by Bill Perkins, Secretary of James River Church Board of Trustees. And he says, this is, be it therefore resolved that James River Church will take action to amend, revise, or restate the Articles of Agreement in the Charter of James River Church from a Chapter 352 nonprofit to become a Chapter 355 nonprofit. So that was the focus of that, is the 352 to 355. That's what it says, right? And then be it upon further review, further resolve that upon approval of this resolution, the offices of this corporation are, and each acting alone, is hereby authorized to do and perform any and all acts, including execution of any and all documents. So this was asked later. You'll hear the reasoning why that is, just to get those articles addressed and being able to answer the questions to do that. That resolution was passed unanimously. And then we have Resolution 2 is going to address the Constitution. Resolution 3 is going to address the bylaws. Do you see that there? Current bylaws, Article 7, amendments. Okay. All right. And then after that meeting, right after these 3 articles, or 3 revisions, or resolutions, you have these. This is a year later, but these court documents are filed, and you have on October 22nd, John Lindell is in front of a judge and says that we want to go from a 352 to 355, and we want to submit these Articles of Agreement, Articles of Incorporation. Okay. And Exhibit A, and you'll see Exhibit A right here, and look at the articles. Basically went from like about 12, 13 pages of articles down to what you see. Okay. Something happened, right, guys? We can see something happened here. And this is what happened when we zoom in. It's one of the things, but you can also see, where's Article 9? Where's Article 7? And where's Article 4? They're missing, right? So Article 9's missing.
So I want to take a few moments to talk with you about a behind-the-scenes change in the life of the church, specifically in our relationship with the Assemblies of God denomination. Very recently, the James River Church Board of Trustees reached the decision to discontinue our formal denominational affiliation with the Assemblies of God. The vote was unanimous, reflecting the unity of our church's leadership.
As I've covered already, that there was not a unanimous decision by, I think, anybody else's opinion, because if you were to, it was, the paperwork was signed and approved in October 2020. They're done. So unanimous decision, though, when you see that phrase, there's a board member that resigned prior to this vote because he was in a disagreement. So take that for what you think of that, but that doesn't seem like unanimous to me. It doesn't seem that our leadership is in lockstep if that's the behavior, right? So Article 4 is that affiliation article. And once again, you see this here, split decision to leave. Okay. None of this was followed, right? They left the AG. Do you know that they follow any of this, right? So Article 4 would have required, John, when he did this, right, should have had all of this. So Article 4 is gone. We know that. So that's why I'm showing you this again. And Article 9 is gone, right? If you would look at Article 9, what does it say? Articles 3, 4, and 7, and 8, and 9. 9 is this one, right? So if you want to amend Article 9, there's no loophole here. You're going to still have to follow this 100% active voting members special business meeting. It's going to have to be in the amending the Articles of Agreement. You're going to have it certified mail 60 days in advance. All of that's part of this Article 9. So even to amend Article 9, you got to have all that. But to disaffiliate, that's Article 4. You have to follow this Article 9. They're missing in the new articles that John Lindell signed on and said that the church voted to approve. Okay. I'll make this all very clear here shortly. Okay. When we get into the audio, I'll let you really understand what happened. So facts going into the June 2019 meeting, the Articles of Agreement had the strongest protectionary provisions. Article 9, most attorneys have ever seen. And then 100% of the active members must vote in agreement to amend the articles for 4 and 7, which 4 is the affiliation, church membership's number 7, and the protectionary provision. This required a special business meeting just to address the amendments. Required 60 days notification by certified mail. I don't know of anybody who got certified mail or notification 60 days in advance. Facts going into the 2019 meeting continued here. We have the Articles of Agreement are clearly defined church membership. Article number 7 does this, and their right to have one vote. This is enshrined in the original articles and protected by the protectionary provision, which is number 9. So hopefully I'm making this clear. The Articles of Agreement clearly defined how affiliation, which is Article 4, was to be handled with the AG. It required a meeting with the AG officials, right? And then it was basically, if some of the members wanted to stay, then those that wanted to keep the assets kept it, and 100% wanted to leave, then the assets go to the Assemblies of God for liquidation. So I think we're all square on that. Hopefully we've got these facts going into the audio, okay? Fiduciary responsibility. We need to know these terms, okay? There's a couple of terms that I've learned looking into this. And when a board of trustees and a chairman of the board are having a meeting with members like they did in this meeting, they have what's called a fiduciary responsibility. Fancy word, it's kind of fun to say, but it's the fiduciary responsibility is like this. They have to be acting in the best interests of the organization and its members. They need to ensure transparency. They need to be providing accurate and complete information. They need to be facilitating fair discussions, ensure compliance with governing documents and laws. The chairman must avoid conflicts of interest and promote informed decision-making. This makes sense, right? You don't want to have boards and chairmen of the boards making and writing these amendments and then going to the members and making them sound a different way. That would be pretty bad, right? You might get people to vote for stuff they didn't understand. And so fiduciary responsibility is a very important responsibility for the board, and they need to take it seriously. And so does the chairman of the board, which in this case is John Lindell. All right. So fraudulent misrepresentation is probably a little more serious, right? So this would be misrepresentation that looks like this. They present amendments or resolution to members in a business meeting with an intentional deceit. So you got to be able to prove intentionality. So pretty hard in the moment. Maybe with hindsight, maybe it's easier to see. I'll leave that up to you guys. They present amendments or resolutions to members in omitting or misrepresenting key information about potential or intended outcomes. This is critical, guys. It's not just, what they say being wrong. It's if they leave out stuff that would have been important for the potential or intended outcomes of these amendments or changes, to mislead members into decisions that may not serve the members' best interests, like losing your membership, right? So fraudulent misrepresentation is a term you need to know. All right, let's jump into the meeting. It's time to get to the audio. I'm sorry the setup took me 30 minutes, but I think it's critical. If we jump into this and you don't have a basis for those articles and kind of what has happened with James River Church, it won't make sense. I can assure you, once we get through these first 10 minutes, 11 minutes of audio, you're going to have a really good understanding of how all of this happened, and it does not look good. Okay, like I said, I am confident this is an unlawful act. I don't know who the intentionality. I don't know how many people were involved, but you're going to see it, and I will clearly outline it for you if you haven't already figured it out.
We don't often have this opportunity. I'd like for our board members to stand as I introduce each of them. I'm very grateful for our board. We have 5 board members, which has been what we've had through the years. And so Dr. Brad Garner, if you'd stand, Brad is our vice chairman. And then we've got Bill Perkin, who is our secretary of the board. David Crawford is our treasurer. David's right there. Justin Fayola is one of our board members. And Jacob McLaughlin is one of our board members. Let's see, where's Jacob? Way in the back there. So those are our board. Thank you. They do a fantastic job. And we have a lot of fun when we're together, as well as conducting the business of the church. The purpose of the meeting tonight is 3 resolutions that we're asking you to consider. The first resolution, as we ask, I'm going to have Bill come as the secretary of the board to read you the resolution. We'll have it up on the screen. The purpose of this resolution is there are 2 types of nonprofit corporations you can have in the state of Missouri. One is called a pro forma corporation, and the other is just a nonprofit, a standard nonprofit corporation. One's called a 352 corporation, the other a 355 corporation. We were incorporated as a pro forma corporation, which the difficulty with that is this, that any decision we make as a church has to go to a circuit judge to approve. First of all, judges do not like ruling on ecclesiastical matters. Second, it's a bad deal for a church from this standpoint. For example, when we changed our constitution and bylaws a couple years ago, well, it's actually more than that, it's 6 years ago, at the West Campus, we had a meeting. And it was regarding sexual orientation, to put some things in our language that we thought would be helpful in the event there were people who wanted to use the facility for a homosexual marriage. That if somebody sued us, we'd want to have language in that. If the judge had said, I don't agree with it, if you got an activist judge or a judge who was not favorably disposed, it's not happening. So what we're seeking through this first resolution is for the congregation to vote to move to a regular nonprofit corporation, which I would suggest most churches, especially if they've been formed in the last 30 years, most churches would have that kind of nonprofit. Now, that's kind of the lay of that. Before Bill.
So what you'll notice is he was just giving the idea that we don't want to have judges weigh in on changes. So, we want to get around this idea of a judicial process. So that's the phrasing and framing, right, for this 352 to 355. It's called a conversion. So 352, 355 conversion. But you'll see here, judiciary process. Here's what the approval process is intended to do for a 352. I'm not trying to make a claim that churches should do one or the other, but this is clear. The nonprofits, what they'll do is they'll take these nonprofit governing documents, and if the amendments violates the voting member rights, right, they're looking at this. So that's part of this judicial review process. Is they'll look at this, and by bypassing required member approval or disenfranchising members, a court could invalidate the amendment or require modifications to protect the members' rights. So the judicial process does have a purpose, 352, and then with 355, it goes to the Secretary of State and gets pretty well quickly addressed. All right.
Now, that's kind of the lay of that. Before Bill reads the resolution to us, if you would like to speak to the issue or you would like to ask the question, this is what we're going to ask you to do. This is mic number 1, mic number 2. I'll have you line up by the mic. If there are that many people, if there's one person, you can come and you can ask your question. We will ask you to give your name so everybody knows who you are. So we'll want you to do that. Let me just, before we do that, I want to acknowledge as well the people from the West Campus, the North Campus, Joplin. If you're from one of the other campuses and you came in for the meeting, raise your hand, because I know we have several. Thank you so much. Bill, take it away.
Okay, this is Resolution 1, Articles of Agreement. Whereas Missouri offers 2 types of nonprofit entities, a Missouri Benevolent Corporation formed under Chapter 352 of Missouri's revised statutes, often referred to as a pro forma corporation, which requires judicial court filings, and Chapter 355 of Missouri's revised statutes, often referred to as the nonprofit corporation law. And whereas James River Church, Inc. is a nonprofit corporation formed under the pro forma decree of incorporation and entered on the 13th day of June 1991. And whereas, and any modification, alteration, or amendment to the Articles of Agreement require court filings and judicial approval. And whereas this structure.
So I just want to point out, right, what are they framing? What is the phrasing, right? That is, they're reading this change from a 352 to a 355 in the language that they're, reading this out to the church before they vote, is that it requires this judicial review, which this structure creates an undue influence. I'm going to propose that maybe that isn't the full purpose of this vote. Okay, I just want to drop that because this is important to get.
Creates undue influence of the judicial system into ecclesiastical matters of the church. Be it therefore resolved that James River Church, Inc. take action to amend, revise, or restate the Articles of Agreement and the charter of James River Church, Inc. from a Chapter 352 nonprofit to become a Chapter 355 nonprofit corporation.
All right. So this is what that resolution looks like. Notice this language, right? Maybe some of you have already gotten it, but we have this Resolution 1, Articles of Agreement, and then it says that take action to amend, revise, restate the Articles of Agreement so that we can convert from this 352 to 355, which, the 352 is just cumbersome. We need to get to the 355, so we don't need this judicial review process that could possibly sideline a decision or a change we want to make to our articles. All right. So it's key to understand, guys, this says, right, you're making what? An amendment to what? Resolution 1 is the Articles of Agreement. We are already out of bounds, right? Is anybody catching this? Articles of Agreement have a process if you're going to vote on certain articles. This is a general, right, amendment, right, that we can take action to amend, revise, or restate the Articles of Agreement. Look what's protected, and there's articles that are protected, that you can't just do this without following Article 9. It says Article 3, 4, 7, 8, and 9 of these Articles of Agreement. And this is at a annual business meeting, right? What should this been at? A special business meeting. So if you're going to amend the articles, right? Amend the articles of agreement. Article 9 says, wait a second, you got to do this not at an annual business meeting, but at a special business meeting. Okay, well, darn, we didn't have a special business meeting. What do we got to do at this special business meeting? We have to have 100% approval. We have to have all voting members have to vote at 100%. They have to do it be notified by certified mail 60 days in advance of all the active members. And then they have to be provided a written copy of the proposed agreement. So we're already breaking our own bylaws, our own articles right here. So whoever's behind maybe not catching that, they're already doing the wrong thing. This is a procedure that's not allowed by their own articles.
Law. And be it further resolved that upon approval of this resolution, the officers of this corporation are, and each acting alone is, hereby authorized to do and perform any and all such acts, including execution of any and all documents and certificates to carry out the purposes and intent of the foregoing resolution. This resolution is brought by the Board of Trustees of James River Church. Mr. Chairman, I move its adoption.
Motion has been made and been seconded. Is there any discussion or questions?
Mike Sullivan, just a quick curiosity question. On you said most churches were at 355?
Most would be most current. In the last 30 years, they'd have probably been at 355.
Why is it being incorporated as the other instead of the 355?
It was just done. There were, the Assemblies of God, there were churches that were done both ways. And it happened when it was done early on by the people that initially founded it, which were district officers at that time. But then subsequent to that time, Kurt Parsley, when he got out of law school, he was, the district had him go and help churches convert over. So he did that for a while, probably in the 90s. I don't think in our end we ever did much about it because we didn't think it was that big a deal, but times have changed. And so there is a concern that I would have relative to that the board has. And so, since we're going to do other business, it's helpful to do this business.
Just curious.
Yeah.
This is a key phrase that I want you to remember. So John states, since we are going to do other business, it's helpful to do this business. Is Resolution 1 to amend, revise, restate the Articles of Agreement sound like a side project? So it kind of does, right? That's kind of what they're making it sound like. Hey, this is just kind of like, we just need to get this done. It's giving this ability to amend, revise, restate the Articles of Agreement over to the board. Just for and are you understanding this, right? It sounds like this is needed to just go from a 352 to 355. But what they're really getting here is what you're seeing in this Resolution 1 that says the language says amend, revise, restate the articles. So, or is this nonchalant, we're just throwing this in with the other things we got to do today? Is this everything? So here's the language again that they put in this Resolution 1. Again, total violation of their own bylaws, not allowed to do it this way. They needed to follow, bylaws, articles. They needed to go through Article 9 to do that.
John, without drawing too much attention,
Can you say your name? I know who you are.
My name is Larry Bradford, and
Thank you, Larry.
I've been around since before John and Debbie, so I go way back to the 29-year-old most wise minister I've ever met.
Okay. Thank you.
But I've also practiced law in Southwest Missouri. I'm halfway through my 42nd year. And during that period of time, I've set up somewhere between dozens and hundreds of churches. And I will tell you that the pro forma corporation is not a good way to go. You only find it you don't find pro forma corporations really being set up.
Again, you'll notice the whole conversation is about going from a 352 to a 355, so we don't have to have this judicial review thing. Not about the amending, revising, giving the authority away.
Much anymore. They were done in the past because if you did a pro forma corporation, you didn't have to file an annual report with the Secretary of State. And the thought was if you had to file an annual report with the Secretary of State, there was an expense with that. And if the church is going to be around for 50 years or 100 years, and you had to file a filing fee with the annual report, you're spending God's money filing reports. However, when pro forma corporations were permitted to be filed in the beginning, there was no Chapter 355. And so you didn't have a choice. Then after a while, the 355 chapter became law. And even then, with filing the reports, you did have to spend quite a bit more than you have to spend right now. Now, the annual report is a nominal fee. You can do it online. And whereas, as Pastor John has said, with the pro forma, it's a major undertaking. You have to file what is equivalent to a lawsuit in the circuit court, and you have to get a declaration from a circuit judge approving what you want to do. When if you are under Chapter 355, it could be as simple as filing something online and paying $7, $10, $15, $25, some nominal fee, and you're done in a matter of minutes, or maybe an hour at the most. Kurt, he's nodding his head as we go along, because both of us have done work for the Southern Missouri District Council of Assemblies of God. I had the privilege of working with the organization of churches for a couple of decades. But to me, it's a no-brainer, and I don't want to put a hush on any other discussion, but.
Do you notice the talk is all about this convenience of the 352, 355 filing, and I'm this gentleman, you know, I'm not don't know him. I'm not saying he's ill-intended here at all. But the discussion, because the way the phrasing of the preparation and the way of the whole amendment resolution was read to the church, people are fixated on this 352 to 355. They're not fixated on what they should be fixated on, and it's this amendment thing that was thrown in there.
It's kind of in my bailiwick.
Thank you, Larry. I didn't know you would be here to do that. That's helpful. Better explanation than I did. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Resolution is carried. So ordered by unanimous vote of acclamation.
All right, guys, that was a big deal. I'm going to show you why. All right, sorry, what do we have there? There. All right, so you'll see this amend articles of agreement, right? If you're if you're going to address these articles of agreement, you need to be doing Article 9. This was what was filed, right? All of the articles are changed, right? Do you see this, Exhibit A? This is where church membership was changed completely. So you have on October 22nd, 2020, John Lindell, the petition, comes petitioner, John Lindell. We're changing from a 352 to 355. We're submitting Exhibit A. And Exhibit A is magically tossing out all of these. Article 4, 7, 9, they were removed. And I can confidently say this vote did not follow their own articles of agreement. Therefore, it is not a lawful vote. That's the issue here. This is the case law I was talking about. This is the problem. The lawful vote required a totally different process. There's some other things that are devastatingly wrong with what you just witnessed if you didn't pick up on it. But the focus on 352 to 355 and not this idea that they're asking for an amending, revising, and restating authority on all of these articles because they're going to convert, right? This term convert, that's what this other, and it's a church issue too, the case law I'm going to share with you. All right, so 3 possible ways that John, the board, or both participated in this unlawful vote. The violation of the current articles of agreement. They just pretended like Article 9 didn't exist, right? Let's just be honest. Let's be clear. Article 9 was just too much of a lock on getting rid of our affiliation requirements with the Assemblies of God, and that those pesky church members that could have voted to not leave the Assemblies of God. So now we just got to find a way to get rid of this lock, and we'll do it with the 352 to 355 conversion and ignore Article 9. Who knew about this? I don't know. Their intentionality? I don't know. You can draw your conclusions based off of listening to the audio. But it's a breach of fiduciary duty. I mean, my goodness, the total breach of fiduciary duty. They're talking about all this benefits to avoid the judicial process. They're not talking about any of the actual ramifications. And that's it. Hey, by the way, all you members that are here tonight, this is the last member meeting. You're never going to say anything again. And you won't have any say in our church, whether we leave the Assemblies of God or not. And I mean, none of that was clear in this breach of fiduciary duty. That should have been clear. And then you have fraudulent misrepresentation, right? I'm not accusing of this, but it's a possible thing. Representing a different reason than the actual reason. So I don't know. Interesting. So violation of the Articles of 9 they cannot amend, right? Do you guys understand what I'm saying here? Thumb up the video. Give me a comment. Let me know that I'm making sense with this because this is really critical. If you don't, hopefully this is just super clear. But violation of Article 9, they cannot amend Articles 3, 4, 7, 8. Sorry, I didn't get the V in front of that. Or 9 without following Article 9 protectionary provisions, which what are they? Special meeting. This is an annual business meeting. 60 days notice. Nobody got notice. Certified mail. Not a soul that I've talked to ever got any 60-day notice certified mail. And no one knew the written copy and proposed amendment for these articles of agreement, right? These are really important founding documents. So there you have it. Annual business meeting. And there it is. Amend. That's the critical thing, right, guys? You see that? That term, amend, was not allowed for an annual business meeting. Fiduciary responsibility. What is this again? The fiduciary responsibility of the chairman of the board of trustees chairman of the board and the board of trustees when presenting amendments and resolutions includes, and you guys can look this all up, right? I mean, I know I typed this out and it's organized this way, but none of this is kind of hidden information, okay? So acting in the best interests of organizations and its members, ensuring transparency, providing accurate, complete information, facilitating fair discussion, ensuring compliance with governing documents, right, and laws. The chairman must avoid conflicts of interest. So let's ask ourselves some questions here. Did John Lindell and the Board of Trustees, when presenting amendments, the Resolution 1, did he act and the board, did they act in the best interest of its members? They totally replaced all the articles of incorporation that removed membership, removed the affiliation, removed Article 9 that protected all that, right? Is that in the best interest of its members? Did they ensuring transparency, scrapping the original articles? Did they tell us in that video, in that audio you heard, where everybody's unanimously voting, right? Because what are they thinking? They're thinking this is just a simple thing. We're just trying to get slicker and more streamlined, making this easier for us to file changes. So that's what they were talking about. So were they transparent? Did they tell everybody they were going to scrap the original articles and just ignore Article 9 and all the others? Did they tell them that? Did they provide accurate, complete information by facilitating fair discussion? Did they ensure compliance with their own government documents? Did they promote informed decision-making by members to avoid conflict of interest? Okay. Good questions. I'd love to see your guys' answers in the comments on that. Fraudulent misrepresentation. Did they present amendments or resolutions to members in a business meeting with intentional deceit? Is there any reason? Is there any good reason that someone on that board or the chairman of the board would want to get rid of this Article 4, per se, the affiliation article? Let's say you had a pastor that wanted to maybe down the road leave the church, the affiliation. Would there be any benefit to intentionally misrepresenting something? Would there be a benefit for John Lindell or the board to omit, right, anything? Is there key information about potential or unintended outcomes, right? Did the church members have any clue that the outcome was potential and maybe intended, that they were just going to rip the articles of incorporation and throw them in the trash bin? Did any of these people know that? And then last, did they mislead members into decisions that they may not serve the members' interests? Guys, ask yourself this. Because of this one vote that was unanimous. Sorry, this one's hard for me to not get super hot. Because of this one vote, they removed membership. The articles of agreement that they filed, articles of incorporation, they filed 1 year later with John as the chairman and no members, no say in the affiliation with the Assemblies of God, and no say in any of the articles of agreement anymore, was because of this vote. And it was nonchalant, right? What did John even say about it? We'll go back to that in just a second. Did John or the board present amendments and resolutions to members in a business meeting with intentional deceit? Did John give reasons that had nothing to do with the actual reasons? I don't know. Did John omit or misrepresent key information about potential, sorry, I got to pull it back up, about potential or intended outcomes to mislead members into decisions that may not serve their interests? Like the potential outcomes in 5 years, I can leave the Assemblies of God affiliation with zero doctrinal accountability. Remember this statement he made? You know, since we're going to do other business, it's helpful to do this business, referring to this Resolution 1. Again, I'll ask you, is Resolution 1 to amend, revise, restate the Articles of Agreement that was phrased as we're just doing it from changing to a 352 to 355? Even a buddy gets up and says, "Hey, I'm an attorney, and here's the deal. We do this all the time. This makes it so much easier," right? Was that just a side thing, or was it everything? Second most important observation. Quick, look over here. That's what I'm kind of thinking with this phrasing, right? So John states we need to simply update, convert from a 352 to 355 for better operations and administrative simplicity. In Resolution 1, in actuality, John and the board unlawfully removed voting church members, right? They did that a year later by filing new articles that they did not have the authority to remove all of these other provisions in there that could at least weigh in on most important documents. So the church couldn't weigh in now on the articles of agreement. That's what they basically did here. Was this made clear to the members at the time of the voting? I'm looking forward to reading some of these questions later, your answers to these questions, right? Was this made clear to the members did you hear that clarification? Hey, by the way, by voting yes on this Resolution 1, you guys are done. We don't need you anymore. Okay. So I hope that was clear. Like, obviously, there's some other really good stuff I'll cover, but therein lies the major It was the one resolution that I'm honest. If I'm being honest, I didn't think was that big of a deal. It was everything. The case law, I'll show you at the end, will prove it. This is the sleight of hand that allows for replacing your articles. The judge didn't catch it. The judge should have done a review. They just did an administrative review, which means they just asked John, hey, did they approve this? Yes. Stamp. Boom. So a full review, a full judicial review likely would have caught that the bylaws that they had, or the articles of incorporation that they had this protectionary provision, and it had a definition of who members are, and it had a definition of who the, what to do with the Assemblies of God, disaffiliation stuff. So it's really important that we get that. That's where this all fell apart.
Resolution is carried, so ordered by unanimous vote of acclamation. The next two resolutions, one has to do with the Constitution, one has to do with the bylaws. What prompts these two resolutions is this, that essentially James River is functioning with minor changes that were made somewhere approximately 2004, 2005. We did some minor modifications to our Constitution and bylaws, but outside of that, the Constitution we functioned under is the same one that was created when the church was first started initially. That being said, as you might understand, the church has grown, and now with the multi-site campuses, there are some changes that really need to be made within the Constitution. And so we are seeking from the congregation permission for the board to revise and amend Constitution and bylaws, so that not only as we have multi-sites today, but as we have more in the future, that we would be able to have it not affect, the idea of getting a church together from several different sites, especially if you go to St. Louis or if you go across state lines, which we are.
So this is interesting, right? Hindsight's 2020. That's why we're here tonight talking, is because of the information of leaving the Assemblies of God and the discovery that, hey, none of these members had any authority anymore. So ask yourself this question. This is a statement. John claims the Board of Trustees needs control to amend the Constitution because of all the new campuses they are going to need to build. Did you know that they had all the campuses? They haven't done any single campus since then. Joplin was before 2019. All the properties, there's no new campuses or properties that I'm aware of since this meeting in 2019. So the audience question I'd ask is, do you think that John needed this power? Maybe he thought he would.
Regularly invited to do by other districts, hey, would you come to this city and start at James River? And that, to what degree that will happen in the future, I cannot say. However, I can say that we will continue to do multi-sites. Joplin was a way to experiment with a multi-site that was outside of the greater Springfield area, but was close enough that if there was something we needed to drive down to Joplin and take a look at, we could. And we've learned so much from that. All of it really designed to help us figure out, okay, if we go to another major city, how do we need to do that? And I think we've learned a lot from the Joplin campus, and it's been a joy to watch what God has done there. But we have, for example, 3,000 people who watch online every week in St. Louis. That's a lot. I'm going to say 3,000 people, I'm talking 3,000 IP addresses that are watching online. We have 1,500 that watch from Chicago every single week. So the online viewership is continuing to grow, and there are people, honestly, that are asking us all the time, will you start one? And those are things that will have to be considered. But for the sake of governance, we really needed to update the Constitution and the bylaws. If you're going to say, well, what kind of changes do you anticipate? To this point, what we've done is we have gone and asked, and it's taken us, it's been an 8-month process. People don't let go of their constitutions very easily, especially larger churches. So for us to get them, and often it comes with, we'll let you have this, but you cannot share it with anybody, because churches have a lot of money invested in that. And so they're careful about that. But we have been able to get constitution and bylaws from some of the largest multi-site churches in the country to be able to see how they have done some governance issues. We've not studied it because honestly, if the congregation for some reason wouldn't approve this, then I'd have wanted wasted my time doing all that glorious constitution and bylaw reading. So I haven't read any of them, but we've got them now. So, and we've looked at some larger AG churches that have gotten there. So when I say look at, we've gotten them, we've not read them yet, but we do know we're in a place where we're going to need to go through and revise and amend the Constitution. And my concern especially is that it will be ongoing as we fine-tune it. So I couldn't be sure that we wouldn't have to continually do it. Therefore, we're seeking from this body, from the congregation, the permission for the board to be empowered to amend and revise the Constitution and the bylaws over the next year or however long it takes to do that.
So that's an interesting way to phrase that, right? So obviously Resolution 1's already unanimously, they've got the ability now to go amend and advise, like I said, they bypassed their own articles to do this, which is not allowed. But John says we are seeking from this body the permission for the board to be empowered to amend and revise the Constitution and bylaws over the next year, or however long it takes to do that, right? So it sounds like temporary. The church now has no members, right? That's what we know now. Hindsight being 2020. We have no members now and no say in church governance. Did this statement make it seem like a temporary solution or that the voting powers would be permanently removed along with membership?
I said, Bill will let you read the first resolution.
This is Resolution 2. This is on Constitution. It says, whereas James River Church, Inc. is a multi-site church with a congregation in 3 different counties in Missouri, and whereas the current membership of the church is over 5,000 people spread out over these counties, and whereas in the next few years, more church multi-sites will be established outside the Springfield area.
I thought it was interesting, right? More church multi-sites will be established, not might be established. We're looking into it. It's like, hey, we are going to do this. And they haven't done another one.
And whereas the current constitution of the church, Article 12 amendments, requires a 2/3 vote of the members to amend at any regular or special meeting. Be it resolved that said article be amended as follows. The current Constitution, Article 12 amendment states, this Constitution may be amended by a 2/3 vote of the membership who are in attendance at any regular or special meeting which has been called for that purpose. Be replaced to read Article 12 amendments. This Constitution may only be altered, amended, or repealed by a majority vote of the Board of Trustees who are in attendance at any regular or specially called Board of Trustees meeting. Be it further resolved that upon approval of this resolution, the officers of this corporation are, and each acting alone, is hereby authorized to do and perform any of all such acts, including execution of any and all documents and certificates to carry out the purposes and intent of the foregoing resolution. This resolution is brought by the Board of Trustees, James River Church. Mr. Chairman, I move its adoption.
A motion has been made to adopt it. A second has been given. Let me say this just for clarification on a few things. There is nothing in our intent to in any way affect our affiliation with the denomination. I think invariably when you start talking this kind of thing, people have a concern or questions regarding that.
What? Right? John says there is nothing in our intent to in any way affect our affiliation with the denomination. Hindsight, 2020. John Lindell disaffiliated with the Assemblies of God by unlawfully removing Articles 4, by not following Article 9, which required vote from the Articles of Agreement, and then vote, notification, all the other stuff, right? So the audience question is, if John had no intent to in any way affect our affiliation with the AG, then why unlawfully remove, or why not just copy, choose to copy over those Articles 4, 7, and 9? It's a great question, right, guys? Why did the board, maybe they didn't know, which is what I think, why did John not have all of these original articles simply copied over so that way, which lawfully that should have happened that way anyways, but I'm just saying, why would you intentionally not put them in there? Did they just forget about them again? I know they forgot about them when they voted, but maybe they forgot about it again and didn't want to have it in those new articles. So very interesting. So let's keep going.
I think as you've been as part of James River, through the years, my feelings on being under the authority of people. I think that's good for everybody to have. And so this is our 4th district superintendent. And so a couple weeks before this business meeting, I called Don Miller and just said to him, want to let you know we're having a business meeting and here's what we're doing. And visited with him and said, Don, we would always do this. When we figure out how this is what it's gonna look like, and we have it all together, before the board would vote on it and make those revisions permanent, I would send you a copy. I'll send the general counsel a copy. I'll visit with Doug Clay, who's the general superintendent. I'll visit with Don Miller. And honestly, if there's something you don't like, just tell me you don't like it, we'll fix it. So that's pretty much the way we've operated with the district.
All right. So John stated that he would provide Don Miller any key changes that James River was making to their constitution and bylaws. We just heard from Don Miller earlier. It doesn't look like he was fully in agreement with what happened just recently. John Lindell disaffiliated with the Assemblies of God, that's what we know now, by this removing of Article 4 from Articles of Agreement. Do you think John Lindell let Don Miller review the new articles that cut out the affiliation Article 4? Do you think he let them see that? Do you think that he said, hey, by the way, we had this Article 4 that was the affiliation article that protected the Assemblies of God with the assets, but here's our new articles. And Don, we just decided we didn't want to have our church members really think about this and vote on it, and now we're gonna just cut them out. And what do you think? Are you good with the Assemblies of God now no longer being protected? Because I'm not trying to be rude, but this is how bad the logic falls apart, right? So do you think Don Miller reviewed those articles and had any clue that Article 4 was just in the original in the original articles? Now it isn't. I mean,
district.
And I want to say something real quick. Stick around. You're going to see some blatant deception, blatant lies, honestly. So I know that we covered how this disaffiliation occurred, how they got around it early on. So I've already covered that. But you're going to see some just blatant deception with the church, things that are not true. And I will show you video evidence of this. It's very shocking the way that John views the church members and their membership and their input, nonchalantly handles it. So I don't want you to think there's not still very interesting things that we should be exposing in the behavior that happened this meeting, especially, like I said, now that we can look back with some better clarity. Sorry, did I skip something there on accident? Yeah.
District. If there's something they don't want us to do, I'll not into it. I mean, it's just, to me, it's part of being under authority. And over my 28 years here in this district and my 7 years in the Kansas district, it's been very valuable and beneficial for me personally and for the places that I've led to have that kind of relationship with the district. So for those who are new to the Assemblies of God, every church is sovereign, but we're what is called a voluntary cooperation. That means we voluntarily agree to cooperate. And so for me, the cooperation is we participate in any place that we can. So we participate heavily in the missions program, general councils in a couple of months, and we'll be down there and we attend that, and we host the district council here, and we're involved in church planting and all kinds of things. Today, the assistant superintendent, Alan Garrison, called and we talked for 45 minutes. So, I mean, it's a relationship where we recognize our role as a leader in the fellowship. And so, there's no desire to interrupt that or to do anything that is not going to be acceptable to the leadership of the fellowship, either on the district level or on the national level. So I want to say that so you know how we view it. And yet, there are things that, especially as we go into a multi-site situation.
All right. So here's an observation question. John stated that there is no desire to do anything that is not acceptable to the leadership of the AG. As he convinces his church members to give his board, he chooses more authority. So in hindsight, John Lindell disaffiliated from the AG, right? Do you think this promise played a role in how people chose to vote? Do you think John saying, "Hey, we're definitely not going to be wanting to leave the Assemblies of God and disaffiliate. So, this authority you're giving us is really just administrative. We're not wanting to get out from under the cover of doctrinal oversight, although it might be minimal, as evidenced by the last 4 years of completely going off the deep end with some doctrine. But yeah, so interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, guys.
Situation we need to think through in terms of governance. And we've made those decisions along the way here at times as we've, made changes, but we're going to need to make more, and it's with the multi-site. It's going to be helpful if we can do that through the.
Gene, you pointed out a great point, and I meant to say that. No one asked. This is a great point I meant to say. No one asked John, "Hey, are you thinking of leaving the Assemblies of God?" He interjected that. Think about this. No one said, "Hey, John, does this mean that we're leaving the Assemblies of God?" He said, "Hey, I think when people are thinking about these kinds of things, you might be thinking we're leaving the Assemblies of God." So he came up with that thought. No one asked it. Wonder why. I'm so sorry, guys. I'll go back to that.
Situation we need to think through in terms of governance. And we've made those decisions along the way here at times as we've, made changes, but we're going to need to make more, and it's with the multi-site. It's going to be helpful if we can do that through the Board of Trustees.
All right, so here's another question. I don't know if these questions are helpful at all, guys, but I thought I'd throw them in there, make us think rather than just drone on and not really process what's being said. So John stated that his authority to amend the Constitution would be helpful for multi-site expansion. Again, James River Church has not added any sites since 2019, which is when this meeting was. Do you think this authority was needed since all of the current campuses were the same as they are today? And by the way, they were all done under this authority that they were given. So this is 2019. The church has been around for 28 years. So grew to the size it is still today, from my knowledge, without changing this. So in hindsight, was there any other reasons why he needed this authority? Sorry, did I skip something there? I might have. Okay.
you have a question, step to the mic. Give us your name. Chair recognizes mic number 2.
Yeah. I'm Pam Cooper, and I am so glad to know where I'm going. That's awesome. Could you please put that resolution back on the screen?
Certainly. Can we have the resolution up there?
Okay. I remember when we changed the Constitution in 2004 or 5, whenever it was. I read the whole thing, every single word, and loved it. So, and I also come to you with the background of my husband's family founded a church in California. So I kind of know a little bit, not even a little bit, but a touch of what can happen because of a church constitution. So that's my background on this thingamajig. My question is this. I understand in the Constitution we made a provision in it that allowed that if there was any question of the members if there was a question from a member, that they have the authority to go and meet with the church leadership and, if needed, to go through the process and create a meeting, just if something happened like that, which God forbid, we never want to happen. Is what I'm reading here on this Constitution may only be altered, amended, or repealed by a majority vote of the Board of Trustees who are in attendance at a regular or specially called Board of Trustees meeting. Now, I completely trust the current leadership of James River Church. Humans are humans. And we have dealt with human and humanity in the past.
What great wisdom from this lady, Pam. I think Pam Cooper. Humans are humans, and we have dealt with humans in the past. This is why we need some sort of oversight.
Does this lineage mean that the Board of Trustees would have complete control over these decisions?
Sorry to interrupt again, guys, but it's worth noting that language in Resolution 2 and Resolution 3 make it very clear that the members, right, the church members, are losing their voting right for the Constitution and the bylaws. Resolution 1 did not make it clear at all to anybody. Nobody in that room was thinking they didn't have any of the say in the articles, which they did prior to 2019. So that's where the deception is. They didn't really have any clue that the one they've already voted on gave away the farm. And even though it wasn't followed in the right progression and there wasn't fiduciary responsibility and there was possibly fraudulent misrepresentation, nobody in this room right now that's arguing the points realizes that they've already set sail. And that's where it's like, wow, hard to hear.
That would be my first question. My second question is, have you read the constitutions from these other large churches, and is this the wording that in those constitutions also? I understand you just say you didn't read them, but I'm just wondering if this is similar verbiage in those large church constitutions before we see this.
So your first question is?
My first question is, would that verbiage give complete control to the Board of Trustees to basically do everything with this Constitution?
Yes, it would. So in answer to your first question, it would. And then in answer to the second.
All right, so John stated that it would give the Board of Trustees total control over the Constitution. So you have the Articles of Incorporation, which we already discussed, the Constitution, which we're discussing now, and we'll get to the bylaws. So this is saying we'll give all of the authority to the board. John removed membership from the Articles. By the way, who do you think chooses the board, right? John chooses the board. John removed membership from the Articles of Agreement without following the clear directions in Article 9. The audience question would be, do you think that any reasonable person was agreeing to never have a say in the church governance and give John this blanket authority, which he didn't have, to remove them as members, right? And Article 4, which would allow him to disaffiliate the church, which they couldn't before. I don't think anybody saw that on the radar.
And then in answer to the second question, in terms of looking at here's what we've done when we've talked to people, because we retain the services of an attorney who's helped a number of AG churches and other churches with their bylaws and their constitutions, and sought his legal counsel. As we've met with him and talked with him, here's the reality that when you're dealing with a lot of things, especially at this level, the complexity of the issues. And we ran into this somewhat when we established an LLC years back. It was a very difficult thing for people to walk people through. A lot of people are like, well, I don't understand it, but I'm gonna vote anyway, just vote for it. But when you're dealing with some of the complexities of a entity the size and the scale of James River, it's impossible to process those with a membership of 5,000.
All right, John stated it's impossible to work with the Constitution with a group of the size of 5,000. So membership is, we know it was removed unlawfully and the disaffiliation from the AG without the lawful vote. So when I'm saying the word unlawfully, guys, they didn't follow the Articles of Incorporation, which is the nonprofit's law, and they just ignored it and violated it. Okay, is there technology or systems that could allow for membership input? I thought this was a really interesting question, right? Because think about how giant corporations, they vote all the time for board members and for resolutions, and so. We're very fortunate. We have technology that allows us to, as we grow, potentially not have these same hurdles.
With a membership of 5,000. And so what we're asking is for the board to be empowered to do that. And I think from the church's standpoint, to know that with the Assemblies of God, they're going to be aware. I mean, they're the overseers of the church. Let me say this as well, because I think this is helpful for people to understand a bit of the paradigm relative to voting. Because somebody could say, well, then what's the purpose of membership if we don't get a vote on anything? I would answer that in two ways. First of all, the purpose of membership is to make.
All right, so I just thought of this, guys. You need to understand what just happened, right? He's saying, what's the purpose of membership? You don't get to vote on anything. Well, where was that discussion on Resolution 1? Where was, like I said, first of all, they didn't have a right to bring Resolution 1. That I want to make that clear. Resolution 1 was already a violation of their bylaws or their Articles of Incorporation. You could not bring Resolution 1. But where was this conversation about losing voters and that you're going to have to vote with your pocketbook? You hear in a second, right? That's what I'm saying. The fiduciary duty. It's so bad. Fiduciary duty is so bad. Overlooked. Where's the board? Where's John? Where is any of these leaders saying, hey, by the way, Articles of Incorporation, where we just put in an amend, and you don't have those rights anymore. Bad.
And second, it is the gateway for leadership into the church. So, for example, there are some positions in the church you cannot hold, not just the board, but the board would certainly be included. The board is drawn from the membership. There are other positions in the church where you have to be a member and you have to sign a leadership covenant in order to be able to participate. People say, well, then do we not get to vote? I would suggest this, that people vote every single week. And they vote with their attendance and they vote with their pocketbook.
Wow. Guys, think about that. When people join a church, right? Now we know that there's disaffiliation, but from the Assemblies of God. But think about it. People are investing their hard-earned money into the kingdom. They're investing in the people they believe there, they trust. They're investing in the structure. They're investing in the fact that this is an AG church, and that it had the, what they thought was those doctrines and oversight. And so all of this money, time, maybe decades for many, inviting their friends and family. And it's like, hey, if you don't like anything, just don't pay us anymore and don't attend. And you're just like, wow, that's the level of investment that you expect from us, is just, throwing us to the side if we just disagree. There's no way we can have any sort of say or input. Kind of hard to hear. All right, so I think I maybe skipped just a few seconds of that. Sorry, guys.
With a membership of 5,000.
Yeah.
And so what we're asking is for the board to be empowered to do that. And I think for the church's from the church's standpoint, to know that with the Assemblies of God, they're going to be aware. I mean, they're the overseers of the church. Let me say this as well, because I think this is helpful for people to understand a bit of the paradigm relative to voting. Because somebody could say, well, then what's the purpose of membership if we don't get a vote on anything?
Yeah.
I would answer that in two ways. First of all, the purpose of membership.
Sorry, we already heard that. I'll move on to the next one. So participation by attendance and giving is enough. That's kind of what he says. It's the observation. So what he says is people vote every week with their attendance and their pocketbook. What's the interpretation? Leadership redefines membership. Responsibility as passive consumerism, not active governance. And I would argue you're not encouraging people to invest long-term because they don't have a say in anything. They don't have any sort of influence. And that's what happened. All right.
They vote on whether they want y'all voted on project partnership. If nobody signs up for it, you voted, we don't want project partnership. If nobody goes to the women's conference or the men's conference, we don't want to do that. Nobody wants to help. We don't, a camp, can't have a camp. So people vote every single time and every single week. They say, listen, I don't want to do that. That's a vote. And with their giving, people don't even have to leave a church to say, I'm not for that and I'm not going to give to that. So as we've talked to the legal.
People don't have to even leave the church to just stop giving. It's an interesting way to phrase things.
Council, and I have to say this, I've not read, we have not crafted this off anybody else's constitution. What we know was in order to amend the Constitution, if the board's going to do that, the congregation has to extend to the board that right. If the congregation chooses not to, you say, what are you going to do? Well, then we're gonna decide as a board how to proceed. I have to say we have not game planned that out, because to me it's as simple as we're going to ask the congregation if they're in, then we'll go from there. If they're not, then we'll go from there. So there's no constitution sitting on somebody's desk or shelf that's been all planned out. But we feel like it is a time where we need to begin to prepare for those things.
I'm in agreement with that. I'm just concerned about accountability. And I understand there is accountability with the denomination. I totally get that. But I think that this body that's in this room might need to know that there's also the accountability factor that's already in our Constitution with the membership, that we can go and look at it. And we can look at we have free access to that.
Look how bold, and I just want to commend a few of these people, right? Real quick. You got to understand the social pressure to stand up in front of a church of people that all trust. I mean, right? You build trust, otherwise you wouldn't be there. You trust your pastor. So they're coming with this pretty shocking information that I don't think any of them were prepared for all of this. And she's standing strong going, this doesn't feel right. I don't really want this. This seems, and the welcoming of this thought is not advanced at all. And think about how hard that is against, I mean, she's essentially standing up to her pastor in front of the church. That's tough. And you'll see what happens here in a second when people want to try to help each other, not have to make that public stance and take the ridicule by going to a ballot. So just a minute, we'll get to that.
The membership is always going to be able to read the Constitution. That's going to be a document that anybody who wants to read is going to be able to read at any time. Let me also tell you something that you may not know.
All right, here's the observation. So John stated you have access to the Constitution anytime you want. Think about that, guys. How often or how many people, if any, will ever take them up on this offer to view the Constitution? Will they honor this request even, right? And what are their concerns, if any? And you're just supposed to vote with your attendance. What if they have concerns? Like, what are you supposed to do with them? You read the Constitution, you gave them this authority, and you don't like something in it, just go pound sand is what you're going to be told. Like, there's nothing you can do.
Tell you something that you may not know. But if you pick up the phone and you call the district superintendent, he's going to love that I told you this. You call him and say, I don't like what John did or what James River did. I promise you, he will call me and he will say, hey, I need to ask you a question. So again, I think.
How many people are thinking that they're going to call Don Miller and Doug Clay tomorrow? Say, we don't like what John Lindell did. Do you think they're going to take your call? I mean, I don't know. What are they going to do now? I mean, now it's going to have to be a legal battle. I'll show you the case law that makes it a little bit easier, a little more straightforward for them, but just crazy.
I think in terms of is the church going to be able, if we were not in relationship with the district to the degree that we are, or even a denomination to the degree that we are, then I think there could be a lot of things. But the denomination,
does he feel that way now? Are you saying the denomination and so you can see what's happening, right? All of these church members, all these members here are hearing, hey, don't worry, we got the affiliation, right? All your concerns about accountability and doctrine and any behavior I might have that isn't right. Maybe I'm lying from the pulpit and not repenting from it. Maybe I'm teaching a different doctrine, or maybe I invite in someone like Bill Johnson at the Assembly of God doesn't approve of anymore, doesn't have a relationship of, which they seem to kind of change back on that. Don't know why, but what really is he telling people here?
You're not a pastor anymore because we took your credentials.
All right. So he's just saying that they could take his credentials. So he tells the church, don't worry about it. You can vote for this because if I do anything that isn't right, no big deal. If I have doctrine that's not right, if I have behavior that's right, I'm unrepentant sin, uncorrectable doctrine, then the AG would just step in, just give Don and Doug a call, and they'll run right on over and take my credentials. Sorry, go to the next one here. So John stated you can simply call the district superintendent and then they can take his credentials. In light of leaving the denomination, is this protection a valid argument for this meeting in 2019? So there's an interesting technique, right? You claim external protections and then you remove them after you get what you want. And that seems to be what happened here.
Clarification, the installation of trustees and the installation of the board, if that's still with the membership, correct?
No, it isn't. It hasn't been.
It hasn't been.
Hasn't
We
been
haven't had a
for
meeting in
years.
Yeah.
And let me explain to you some things, and we're going to give some other people. Let me explain to you some of the evolution of the church. Here's what has happened along the way. When I talk about the complexity of some things, for example, we were getting financing for building projects, and the bank would come to us and say, we have given you a rate that you cannot, some will remember this because we asked you to vote on it, but it doesn't make sense when you have to operate this way. We'd say, we need you to approve the financial package because the Constitution requires that, but we can't tell you the rate because the bank doesn't want that released. It's favorable, and they'll have clients coming saying, why did you give them that rate? You won't give me that rate, and we can't do that. So we said, we can't tell you the rate, but we need you to vote yes and just trust it. It's a good.
Couldn't the board of trustees simply be the ones that are in charge of maybe approving the rate for the financial package, right? It seems kind of silly that this is the reason why you're removing the members' constitutional ability to vote here. So.
Well, that doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I'm saying? People were saying, I'm voting on board members. I don't even know who they are.
So what's interesting is he just said, I'm voting on board members. I don't even know who they are. He's going to tell you in a minute that they've never had a representative government. Those aren't the same thing, by the way. So John's telling the truth in one of those statements. Which one is it?
I mean, I don't even know who these people are.
All right. So here we are. We got members don't even know who they are. So the observation is members don't even know board members they vote for. And then transcript evidence says people were saying, I'm voting on board members. I don't even know who they are. And then the interpretation is applied that membership votes were meaningless because members were uninformed anyways, which is not necessarily a logical conclusion there, right? Remember that John Lindell just said that we are voting on board members and we don't even know who they are. That is a representative type of government, church government, right? It's representative. We're voting on board members. The church members are voting on more board members, okay? He said that just a second ago. He's going to reverse that and 180 himself.
I don't know who they are. I mean, I don't even know who these people are. So what's happened is those have been small changes, but it's that kind of decision only on a much bigger scale that often involves legal ramifications that are significant to the church, liability issues that are involved, other things that require, that I think would be very difficult to process in a congregational format, and especially once you go beyond a city. We can get everybody together here, but those days are limited. So that's the thinking here. Mike number one.
Yep. Scott Chick. What I see is, doing this, bless the young lady, is the staff is accountable to the board is accountable to the membership, taking that accountability away from the board by giving them this autonomous power. But yet on a multi-site location, where is the opportunity from members from other sites then to have the input on the board? Because like you just stated, people are voting on board members they don't even know. And out of all fairness, I'm going to bet every one of those 5 are from this campus. So
That's not true. Let me just make it clear. That's not true.
Okay, I apologize. But as we go forward, will the board grow from the 5 that started in 91 to accommodate 4 other locations, other aspects, or other regions, should I say?
The answer to that is we have never felt that the board operates as representatives of the people. The board
They've never felt that they operate as representatives.
operates as fiduciary custodian.
All right, so they operate as fiduciary custodians, right? All right, says board members are fiduciary custodians, not representatives, but originally set up the congregational voting and member accountability where the board was chosen by the people. Board operates as fiduciary. So the evidence is right here, never representatives. Yet earlier historical evidence shows that member votes were part of the governance. So it used to be we approved the budget, all finances in front of the people, and then the governance philosophy evolved, contradicting prior practices.
Our pastoral team and staff continues to be accountable to the James River Church Board of Trustees. As Scripture instructs, we believe in serving under biblical authority. This structure provides strong checks and balances to ensure the highest level of integrity is maintained in ministry, in finances, in personal conduct, and in doctrine.
So this board that is really just fiduciary custodians now is in charge of doctrine. So this is from when he disaffiliated, let's see, 2.5, 3 weeks ago, and states this, that they're going to keep you accountable, right? They're going to keep our leadership accountable. They're going to keep all of us taken care of. And really, he's just going to say they're custodians. They work on the money, work on the finances. You're going to hear this in just a minute. So which is it, John? I mean, you said it before that you were the doctrine was going to keep oversight from the Assemblies of God, and now you're saying it's this board that you choose is going to keep you accountable. It makes no sense, anyways. By the way, can we just understand that if the chairman of the board is picking the board is not keeping the chairman accountable. That doesn't make any sense. No logic there at all, right? The only way that a board is keeping the chairman accountable is if the board either elects the other board members, right? They have autonomy, or the members of the church elect the board. Both are reasonable structures, I think, and allow for this accountability structure to actually exist. It does not exist the way John is doing it now, which is picking the board members.
Their job is to care for the financial condition. Once you get a board, speaking as a pastor now who has almost 35 plus years in pastoral ministry, when you have a board that says we're representatives, you get pretty much what you have in Washington, D.C. And that has never been, I've been, when the church was small, you're not representatives of the people. You're here to do a job to make sure that things are done in a financially appropriate way and to make sure that you're managing in your role as a board the things that are tasked to the board. So the idea that the board is made up of representatives would be philosophically foreign to James River from my 28 years of leading. So if you've been operating under that assumption, I mean, I just have to say that's never been the assumption of the leadership or of the board ever since I've been a pastor.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Since he's been a pastor, guys. The James River Church Board was representative despite John's emphatic statement that it has never been representative. That is a bold misrepresentation, 100%, John. That is not true. And I've hidden the identities here, but you can see, hi Grant, I served on the JRC board from 1998, 2002, 2004 to 2006. Both of my terms, I was chosen by the members of the church. My first term was extended by 1 year since we were in the midst of a building program for the current South Campus. Hope that helps. It did help. Thank you. Because obviously if I was just saying it, my wife and I both were like, I'm pretty certain, we were in some of these meetings where we remember a couple of people that were brought before and, they introduced themselves, why they thought they should be on the board. And so we're like, no, the church used to pick, then it was representative. So 2002 was interviewed so-and-so was interviewed to run for the board. And John explained that there were 3 board members and 3 trustees. Now it's down to just 3 trustees. You had to pass his filter, and then the church voted. So that was the process.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Kimberly Dingenfelter. My concern and my question goes goes to the fact that right now we do vote for that representative. I do understand that as we become a multi-site.
You vote for who?
That we vote for whatever the situations are that you guys are bringing before us, the amendments, the resolutions, things such as that. As we go forth as a multi-site, I do see where that can be constraining for the church to do business, because you have to get a representation from every location to have the 2/3 of the complete membership of the entire congregation present in a meeting. How you would handle that, who knows? So I see where that could be a challenge. My concern is if we give the board complete control, which I understand they have to be able to go and do the work that they need to do the research, see what the best fit is, but not having anything presented for discussion once we have the final draft, that's a little concerning for me. I trust our.
Good for her, right, guys? I mean, I'm just, it makes me a little emotional to think about these people that are speaking up in front of probably almost 1,000 people there, I'm guessing, and boldly kind of going, hey, pastor, we trust you, but like, this seems really kind of messed up, right? Yeah.
Leadership currently, but with the way and influence we've seen in other denominations and other things that have challenged our faith and what actually lines up with them.
So her concern, she's phrasing it here, is that, hey, doctrinally, we want to have a board that has some sort of authority and oversight. So if maybe you're going to stay with the Bible, what about the next pastor, right? What about the next pastor? How are we making sure that if there's things that are, they're bringing in, let's say they're bringing in someone like Bill Johnson who teaches kenosis and it's totally all out of, off base, and then the whole church is adopting it. It would be great if you had a board that could say something, could step in and say, hey, knock it off. This is not okay. Like, yeah, we're not okay with you changing the doctrine of the church because you found your new favorite person to follow. And we need to be, true to God's word. And so I commend this lady for taking on such a difficult task in this moment.
There's a risk we run there, I believe, that if the congregation is not able to have that final, no, we're not going there, you're kind of walking a line you shouldn't. I think down the road, it could be an opportunity for a potential issue that we may or may not see come to pass.
Let me speak to that, because when we're talking about
how futuristic was she talking right there? She's saying, what if a pastor goes off and changes doctrine and teaches things that what can we do as a church membership to have any say in our governance to affect change and prevent a church that we've invested? I mean, how many building campaigns has James River done? And how many of you watching right now, just curious, you don't have to put in the dollar amount, but I know the people watching right now, there's hundreds of you. There's almost 500 people watching right now between Facebook and YouTube. I promise there's probably half of you that have given tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of your money over the course of 20 years to the kingdom to invest in it. And I'm not saying people haven't been impacted, but think about this issue, right? Being able to just change course and all of your investment that you've been part of is now, you got to go, well, what do I do? Right? So what a foresight for this person to see this and go, I want to be investing in the kingdom where I can have assurance that I'm not going to be watching something go off course. So.
That's not something any local church can change. You either are in or you are out doctrine. So the church, the doctrine, to be in the Assemblies of God church, your doctrine has to be Assemblies of God. In the day it's not, then that is problematic. I mean, if I was advocating that, I would lose my ministerial credentials. Again, that's the value of being attached to a denomination.
You heard it from him, guys. That's the value of being attached to the denomination. So he's saying the value to being attached, which they're not attached anymore, is that there's doctrinal stability and there's at least some sort of oversight. Like I said, I'm not thrilled with the Assemblies of God oversight. I think they've overlooked a lot of stuff and invited a lot of problems by not addressing it. But John just said, that's why we have this doctrinal oversight. Now, the ARC, by the way, which is now what they're part of, there's zero doctrinal oversight, guys. It's like churches from many different backgrounds that don't have any sort of agreement on doctrine. So now it's really whatever you want to do. It's really up to you. If you want to, pursue, the word of faith doctrine and just make that your thing, and everything's all about God's always going to heal us here on earth. You can do that, and obviously he's been doing that for a while with the Assemblies of God oversight that hasn't done anything either. But yeah, let's hear.
So I want to take a few moments to talk with you about a behind-the-scenes change in the life of the church, specifically in our relationship with the Assemblies of God denomination. Very recently, the James River Church Board of Trustees reached the decision to discontinue our formal denominational affiliation with the Assemblies of God. The vote was unanimous, reflecting the unity of our church's leadership.
Again, guys, not unanimous. I know for a fact a board member resigned because he didn't agree with the decision to leave the Assemblies of God. Largely, I'm going to guess, over this doctrinal issue, right? So, wanted accountability. It's not just doctrinal, it's just accountability in general, behavioral accountability, all sorts of oversight that you have.
Our pastoral team and staff continues to be accountable to the James River Church Board of Trustees. As Scripture instructs, we believe in serving under biblical authority. This structure provides strong checks and balances to ensure the highest level of integrity is maintained in ministry, in finances, in personal conduct, and in doctrine.
And we know for a fact that no longer they're not overlooking the doctrine now. Okay. So I thought I'd throw this in here, and I'm not going to read everything, but 5 key points of biblical authority, plurality of elders. So John says they're fiduciary custodians, really financially. They need to help manage the finances of the church and keep them profitable. So, but really, the Bible says the church's board responsible for extends far beyond finances, right? The primary focus should be spiritual leadership, shepherding the congregation, and advancing the mission of the church. Key biblical principles include spiritual oversight, and then we have servant leadership, mission and ministry, care for the flock, accountability and integrity, right? These are great ones. A church board overly focused on finances risks becoming worldly, neglecting its calling to nurture faith and community. I want to make certain I didn't skip a section of this last one here, guys. 1 second.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I don't think I did, but let me jump.
Which I understand they have to be able to go into.
Then that is problematic. I mean,
I think I got it.
If I was advocating that,
yeah,
I would lose my ministerial credentials.
All right, let's go back. Sorry. Play. All right.
Thank you.
Did these two. All right.
Our
now we're back on it. So key observations here is that congregational voting is seen as outdated, unworkable, and even dangerous, right? If you insist on congregational voting, I think that it becomes very restrictive. Voting is framed as an obstacle to growth, not a protection to accountability.
To a denomination. I would suggest this to the membership, and I think this is my concern as a leader, that if you insist on congregational voting, I just think that becomes a very restrictive thing when you start going out beyond, and now you start saying, well, we've got to go out and we've got to have all these meetings. You're going to spend a lot of time trying to get consensus. And when we're talking to the multi-site, they're saying congregational voting. in a large multi-site, when you get to the size we are, and from there on, it's untenable. So we're not finding models that are saying, yes, we should have that. And I think what the church may face over time is that the governance model becomes like a suit that doesn't fit, and eventually is an impediment to the church doctrinally. I mean, again, you just have to, at that point, you have to say that the denomination and the affiliation is where the doctrinal purity comes from. But again, I would want to speak to this. I feel like there's a bit of I understand the uncertainty. I think we have to also, it used to be we approved the budget. It used to be we had all of the finances in front of the people and all of that.
Think about that, guys. Used to have all the finances in front of people. Everybody used to get to see it. They had a budget. Church this size, right? It's millions, tens of millions of dollars every year. Lots of opportunity for things to not be above board and potential unethical things to occur. So now you have a board of 3 people that John chooses that maybe have full access to everything on the finances, but goodness, guys, right? Not great accountability structure.
And I think you have to look at the trajectory of what has happened under the leadership of the board as fiduciary custodians. You just have to say, if you look at our last annual report, the income of the church last year, it's published every year and it's audited and all, has grown substantially by millions of dollars to the glory of the Lord. And in addition to just the millions that have been given to missions. So that's the thing I think that the congregation has got to think through a bit is not to recognize.
So what's interesting, right? And I kind of got this out of order. I knew one of my slides was messed there, but I just read you all of the things that the board does, right? And the financial aspect of it is only a part of it, but he acts like that's all they're supposed to do in this meeting, right? He acts like all the board is to do is, if they're doing the right job, we're making money. And that's not what the Bible teaches. That's why I shared the couple slides earlier. So you can go back 5 minutes if you want to see that. But I just think it's an interesting observation that he's defining the success of the church and the board. Their role of being successful is this idea of financial custodians, not healthy church. And how do we define a healthy church? And I'll get that in a minute.
That when we look around, we say, well, we're going to come up with something that nobody else is doing because we want to keep voting. I think that could be ill-advised, which is why we're presenting this. Though I appreciate people's desire to vote.
And I understand what you're saying. I guess my concern kind of is, if you look to, I hate to bring up government, but if you look to government, if we were to give them a blank, go run, do what you feel is best, we can always get some opportunity for there to be sidetracks that would not represent the church directly, you know what I mean, or represent the people of the U.S. even directly. I mean, that's where my concern is, that in this role, we give, it's kind of like writing that blank check. Here you have ultimate power to do anything and everything and not come back with your final thoughts and just kind of, even if it's not a vote, present it to us, let us know what's really going on, and kind of keep an accountability there with your membership. And I understand you get into problems where, okay, so now we're just trying to please the people instead of doing what God desires. But that's kind of my thought process.
Great. Thank you.
Hello, Ryan Pinnell. So my question would be, it kind of sounds like you're saying two things. I think one is scalability is a big issue, but then the other one is the multi-site facet. Could we not do this electronically also? I mean, same thing, multi-site location in terms of having the congregation there to voice any concerns?
The issue, I think the issue when you get into the multi-site is simply the ability of the leadership to interact with that multi-site in a way that is able to provide the same kind of leadership that you can in a local site. And I would suggest that's not possible. And I think that's part of what is behind it is it's not possible to do that electronically or otherwise. That when you start processing constitutional decisions, and now you're working at a level where it involves multi-site and the legalities of that, you're asking a church of thousands of people spread out over potentially different states, but certainly.
So it's worth noting that like, again, they haven't added any sides. They're not over different states. And electronically, you could argue that they could easily vote. But he mentioned something about relational component there. And let's think through that just a little bit, right? If you have relationship with people, you can convince them to maybe vote the way you want. If you don't, then you're going to have, you can't just heavily lean on the trust in the relationship component. So key moments here, we got an observation to make. Electronic voting on remote engagement was dismissed, right? I thought it was a pretty good idea. I think that's untenable. Interpretation, they rejected ideas like electronic voting even when suggested, not because it's impossible technically, but because it maintains member control. Here's some examples of companies who use electronic voting. I just thought it was interesting. Like, I don't want to hang on this too long, but the AARP, like 38 million voters. It's crazy, right? Large companies, millions, billions of revenue, and millions of voters, all able to be educated and with technology vote and be a part of it. I'm not like trying to convince every church to operate like this. I'm just saying like it doesn't really work in the sense that this is a very easy thing to be accomplished. So the argument is it just kind of falls flat.
Potentially different states, but certainly in our case over the state, you're asking them, you're expecting to be able to process that with them. And I think that's untenable. Personally, I mean, to be able to do that is extremely difficult. So you have to trust that that the leadership is going to do that. Let me just say this, because to speak to the previous discussion, the things we're talking about are things that have to do with often the finer points of governance, certainly not the issues of finances, because the board is able to financially do we buy property, we sell property, we engage in financing, we negotiate, all of that without any input anywhere. We decide to put a campus in. Congregation has zero vote on that. Those to me are the issues that determine honestly whether the church is going to make it or not, in terms of its, is the church going to be successful or not, is not going to be determined by a legal question that affects the potential liability of the church. It's probably going to be determined by, oops, we put a campus in a city and spent way too much money. I know that's something comforting for you, but that's the reality of that. The viability of the church is going to be determined by whether the board is capable in managing debt versus assets versus income versus, church health issues. Those are the things that affect viability, constitutional issues, bylaw issues.
I don't know. It was hard to listen to the equating of success as really, are we financially solvent rather than what the Bible teaches, right? So biblical definitions of church health, surprisingly, finances really don't even make the cut. I mean, clearly the early church would have no understanding of what we do now in churches and how much money we spend and the size, scope. Again, that's probably a totally different argument, discussion. I'm not saying I'm an expert on that, but I do think this is pretty clear. the board of elders and the health of a church, them helping maintain that, spiritual vitality and faithfulness, right? Unity and love, maturity and growth, mission and outreach, holiness and discipline, right? Holiness would be like, again, is your pastor saying something that's not true from the pulpit and then just denying it or doubling down on it and never making it right? That would be a holiness issue. Discipline. Are we have good church discipline? Are people, that are acting out in a way they shouldn't? Are they brought into account in a loving way, but with authority, right? And accountability and dependence, obviously, on the Holy Spirit through all this. All right, we have a contradiction here. It says downplays risks of the constitutional changes by framing finances as the only real danger, yet uses legal risk as justification for needing full constitutional power. So the constitutional issues, bylaw issues, not what make or break a church. Yet, the entire meeting was about the legal dangers of being under the wrong structure and the need to amend governance. Do you see that, guys? It's just such a contradiction. He's talking out of both sides here, right? Downplays the risk of constitutional changes and then upplays it when he wants.
I don't know of a church anywhere that I would say, well, it's a constitution, it's something. It was the board and the pastor made really stupid decisions or unwise or unwarranted decisions would be what I would say to the congregation. I think you have to, points of governance or legality are not the things that make or break the church.
And one other quick question, is the church leadership, are they favoring this? Did you spoke to them?
Yeah, Don and Doug are, I haven't talked to Doug because until I talked to Don, and Don's like, yeah, when you get it, let us know, let us see it. The relationship with the district is such that, and it's not a good old boy relationship. There have been times we were going to build a building and do things, buy a building and do things, and the district said no. Or they said, here's what they said. They said, we'd rather you didn't. That's good enough for me. I'm not going to do it. You can, the last time we were going to do it, they said, you can do that. We will not stop you, but it gives us pause. Well, if it gives you pause, I'm not going to do it.
So guys, real quick, right? He's commenting about how, hey, there's this accountability. So don't worry about giving our board this authority because we've got the accountability. Do you see? And now he's removed that accountability.
I just believe in that kind of relationship. So it's not a good old deal. And I took Don, and one of the pastors was with me when I was talking and heard our conversation. Listen, you don't like it, I won't do it. I won't do it. I just think I'm too afraid to go out on my own. Out from under leadership. I believe in that principle, and it's served this church and me through the years very, very well. So that's what I think is the safeguard for the congregation. And
so what is the safeguard now, right? The safeguard for the congregation is we had the Assemblies of God, the accountability structure. So in 2019, he's saying, hey guys, don't worry about giving me all of this authority and the board this authority. Like I said, it's not even right to say he gave the board this authority. He picks the board. So he's really asking for this authority. So he's telling the church, hey, no big deal. The Assemblies of God's got us covered. Don't worry about it. Give me this authority and we'll be just fine. If anything goes off the rails, the Assemblies of God is going to protect us. And now what's his statement now, right? He says, this board of trustees is really what's going to help keep us in line. They're not just about finances now. They're about all the other things, discipline, doctrine. And so that's what you'll hear here. So
the James River Church Board of Trustees reached the decision to discontinue our formal denominational affiliation with the Assembly.
Let's move on. We already heard that. Sorry.
So that's what I think is the safeguard for the congregation. And, that's where I would be on that. Mike, number one.
Tracy Mitchell, Could you bring the resolution
I
back
like
up,
this
please?
guy. You'll like him.
Be it further resolved that upon approval of this resolution, the officers of this corporation are, and each acting alone is, hereby authorized to do and perform any and all such acts, including execution of any and all documents and certificates to carry out the purposes and intent of the foregoing resolution. Previous to that, this Constitution may only be altered, amended, or repealed by a majority vote of the Board of Trustees who are in attendance at any regular or special call. Okay? So educate me on this because I don't know. How many trustees are there?
There are 5. We introduced them here.
If one shows up and the other 4 don't, can they vote?
Well, I don't think we would ever want that on it in any.
Could
There's always going to be a four.
Could it happen?
No, well, I can't happen today, and it wouldn't happen.
But if this passes, and you have 5 board members, and 4 don't show up, 1 can make the decision. What is this?
Let me have our attorney, our Chief Operations Officer, Kurt Parsley, who is also an attorney by training, and who crafted that language, explain. Why did you write that, Kurt?
Point of information, Mr. Chair.
Let me say this. I'm not an attorney. I have a master's degree in the School of Hard Knocks.
Point of information, yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mitchell, the last paragraph that you just read is a boilerplate. It's intended to allow, if the court requires any additional documents to be signed by the board, that they'd be able to sign them. So in this case, whether we have to sign a decree, I'm sorry, not sign a decree, the judge would sign the decree, but the petition and the accompanying documents, it would allow them to sign that. Our Constitution states that there cannot be action by a board unless there's the quorum of the board needs to be present. So there has to be a quorum present. And that's what the Constitution says. So that the previous statement was related to amending, but in order for the board to actually act, elsewhere in the Constitution, it calls for a quorum to be present.
Okay, define quorum.
It has to be more than half. So it has to be 3.
So it could be 2.5 people. It could be 2. It could be 3.
It could not be 2. It could be 3.
It could be 3. So you could have 3 people on that board making decisions.
We currently have that.
Okay, if you currently have that, why do you need this?
What a great point, right? If you currently have that, then why do you need this? I like that. He's thinking, right? If you currently have that authority, then why do you need this authority? So Tracy Mitchell, good for him. Definitely one of the most clear thoughts during this. There's another really good one here. Diane Hood, I believe, speaks up in a minute, and I really enjoy hearing her raise some concerns. But Tracy says works hard to get an answer on how many people need to vote to control the whole church. What no one saw is that John Lindell would be the one choosing and controlling the entire board. That's the issue, right? Because the articles that they refiled and scrapped all the old ones. John's the board of chairman of the board, picking all these guys. And here is, and I've kept this anonymous, but this is fantastic evidence that shows how this goes on. Because I think a lot of people hear me say, well, John picks the board, and they're like, I don't know, maybe he doesn't. No, he does. This is proof. So, hey, Grant, thank you for all you're doing to get the truth out regarding James River. You and Lorna definitely helped our family see the false teaching more clearly. I wanted to respond to your post regarding board members, but didn't want my comment to be seen by everyone. Then he says, the entire time, let's see, then I blocked it out so you couldn't see. But he worked very close in John's office as well. The entire time I worked there, the process for choosing board members was done by John alone. There were 5 board members, not including John. They would serve 3-year terms, and he would choose those replacements. So now they've got it down to 3 that are filed. But why do people message me? Like, this is maybe a good point. I get hundreds of messages, and I only show portions of I only talk about portions of things, because the amount of church hurt, abuse, spiritual abuse issues, I mean, obviously, I don't believe all of them are true or 100% true, and I understand that a lot of them are how people perceive stuff, and sometimes it's just not fully all the facts. But the reality is people are so afraid to speak up here, and the truth is there for us, and so that's what I'm really trying to do tonight is make sure that we're clear on what's happening and provide evidence with it. All right. So states, this is contradictory. States' current systems have quorum protections, but the language being voted on weakens members' access and control irreversibly, right? The systems they describe protects quorum, but guts meaningful member input. It moves from an open congregational model to a trust us autocracy, regardless of quorum technicalities.
Why do you need this? Well, what we're saying is we want to amend the Constitution, have the ability to do that. I mean, I don't know that I understand the question.
Okay, well, let me ask one other question. I'll come back to that. One of the primary concerns that you voiced is multi-site locations and not being able to collectively get everyone in one place at one time, or whatever the case may be. The gentleman before me asked about technology, the technology that we have now. Would that not?
I think there's a difference. There's a difference between the technology and the ability for the leader to interact personally with people. I can tell you this. Let me just put it to you this way. Okay. I've not been to Joplin one Sunday. You can say, well, you should be down at Joplin. Okay, I'm not here. Which do you want? Do you want me down at Joplin, or do you want me here? I'm going to tell you, most people are going to say, I like him to be sitting here speaking. I'm going to get to Joplin, but I've never been to Joplin on a Sunday. I don't have any personal relationship with the majority of the people in Joplin, other than those that I know that went from here to Joplin. Once you move into that realm, that's a different level of relationship, and you don't have the same relational capital in that situation. You don't have the same relationship in that situation. So when you start saying, this is why, when you start saying, we want everybody voting everywhere, you're loosing Pandora's box.
Listen to the scary phrase, right? You're loosening Pandora's box to the idea that we're going to continue just going the way that we are because we have the same sites that we've always had. I mean, really, in hindsight, this kind of scary looming, we're going to lose, Pandora's box. Think about it, guys. If you trust your pastor, you trust John, which we all, I'm assuming everybody that's either still there, they'd probably trust him, and people that aren't there, like myself and my wife, and probably many others in this video, but we at some point really trusted John. So when somebody tells you, you trust, it says you're losing Pandora's box, you're like, oh man, yeah, we're really messing up. I mean, he uses very strong language as he's seeing a little bit of pushback from these individuals to try to overcome the pushback.
That point. And I think that's a real concern, and that's what multi-sites have found. The primary campus is the one, I can tell you this, that even last Wednesday, for example, I went around to the different campuses.
So I'm not going to tackle all of this. It's just a few thoughts, right? Megachurch versus multi-site. What's the biblical church model, or is it a business model, right? So one of the things I think is this is maybe an overarching theme in the church, but we have some challenges here, right? The pastors should know their flock. They should model humble leadership. How are you modeling it if you're not in front of people, leading in front of people and walking hand in hand with them? You should be investing in discipleship. How do you invest in discipleship if all you do is you speak on Sunday? Okay. How do you foster a community if all you are is on stage on Sunday? How do you preach and counsel faithfully? And how do you be present and loving?
My relational interaction with people is different at every single campus. Yeah, I've talked to the staff about that and talked about how I can improve that, but at the same time, there is the responsibility, and there is the primary need for me to be at this campus more than I am every other. And so once you start saying we're going to vote on all these things and have all of this, that's not, it's not the way a multi-site will work.
Okay, well, I would say that my opinion is it's too much of a concentration of power. That's my opinion. And I think we move to a ballot vote.
That's pretty good, right, guys? It's too much concentration of power. And I move we go to a ballot vote. So Tracy was ready for this, and smart thing. Think about what's happening, right? He's seeing the writing on the wall that people are going to have trouble voicing their true opinion through a voice vote on something so important. By the way, all of these should have been requiring a more legit voting, especially if you're going to try to get articles of incorporation changed. All right.
Well, we need to discuss, are you making a motion to move to a ballot?
Yes, I am.
Okay, we have a motion to have a ballot vote, which we're prepared to do. Okay, do we have a second first? Second? Okay, we're prepared to do that. And we'll have to ask the congregation if they want to do that. So all in favor of a ballot vote, signify so by saying aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Do you see how close that was? You wonder if it wasn't different. Obviously, the guy holding the phone here, you could hear him. But, I mean, that was so close to a ballot vote, which if you were voicing your opinion for a ballot vote, keep in mind that means you're probably saying no to this, right? That's why they wanted the ballot. They're like, yeah, give me the ballot. I'd like to say no. I don't want to have to say no later loud. I want to be able to just write no. Can I say no now? Not everybody think I don't trust John and, I'm a bad person in this church, right? So the fact that this was somehow a difficult transition to a ballot, that those bylaws or constitution, whatever's orchestrating the way they're going to a ballot, that's pretty messed up. Because people don't want to be, they don't want to be getting a bunch of flack. Think they're not going along.
So the motion is failed. Call for the question. What that means is, do I have a second on that? Okay. What that means is we're suspending discussion and we're moving.
Right to suspending discussion. It's crazy, right? Like immediate to that, boom, we're done. Let's vote. I mean, I was shocked how quickly there's people standing at mics still. I'll let you finish.
To a vote at that time. So all in favor of having the vote signify so by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, so we are going to have a vote. So those at the mics, I'll need to ask you to sit down. There's a point of order, but I think you can't have a point of order if you've already called for the question, correct? Heard? So according to Robert's rules, we cannot. Sorry, Mark. Thank you, Bill. So you have the resolution before you. All in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The resolution has passed. We have resolution number 2 for you, which is essentially the same resolution but has to be put into the bylaws.
This is resolution 3, bylaws. Whereas James River Church, Inc. is a multi-site church with a congregation in 3 different counties in Missouri, and whereas the current membership of the church is over 5,000 people spread out over these counties, and whereas in the next few years more church multi-sites will be established outside the Springfield area, and whereas the current bylaws of the church, Article 7 amendments, requires a majority vote of the members to amend any to amend at any regular or special meeting. Be it resolved that said article be amended as follows. Current bylaws, Article 7 amendments. The bylaws may be amended by a majority vote of the members of the church who are present at any regular or special business meeting. The proposed amendments shall be made available to the voting membership on the 2 Sundays prior to the date of the meeting, or shall be mailed to the active members 5 days prior to the meeting. Be replaced to read Article 7 amendments. The bylaws may be altered, amended, or repealed by a majority vote of the Board of Trustees who are in attendance at any regular or specially called Board of Trustees meeting. Be it further resolved that upon approval of this resolution, the officers of this corporation are, and each acting alone, is hereby authorized to do and perform any and all such acts, including execution of any and all documents and certificates to carry out the purposes and intent of the foregoing resolution. This resolution is brought by the Board of Trustees of James River Church. Mr. Chairman, I move its adoption.
Motion's been made. Do we have a second? You have the resolution before you concerning the bylaws, essentially the same as the Constitution. The purpose is the same. We just have to have that language of the Constitution and the bylaws. Chair recognizes mic number 2.
I move for a ballot vote.
Okay, we have a motion for a ballot vote. Do we have a second? Second. All in favor of a ballot vote signify so by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion has been defeated. Chair recognizes mic number 1.
Diane Hood, and
So Diane Hood here is brilliant, and I'm going to give you a backstory. Not from I haven't heard from her, just know from multiple sources. But this is I love the bold stance that this lady takes.
I think that what we've been hearing a lot tonight is people are concerned that they're not going to have a voice in what the leadership of the church does. And we would love to do this. I mean, we adore you, Pastor Debbie, Lord. The leadership has led us to this point successfully. We have grown, we have multiplied to the glory of God, right? And we have all been a part of this, and we have entrusted ourselves to this leadership. So everything that's been in place to this point, you guys have done really, really well. You're asking us to trust you with things in the future as we continue to grow.
Do you listen to the earnesty in her voice, right? This is a woman who trusts John. This is a woman who's invested, her and her family have invested. How many of you could relate, right? You relate, you pray over the pastors, you invest.
And I think that if a lot of us felt we had a voice in how that proceeds, some sort of protocol that we could make our concerns known, like a meeting with the board if it's necessary, or things that you plan for the future, not necessarily where you lay out all the details, but much like you've done in the past, that allows us to be confident in how you're leading us, would give us some comfort, because you guys have done such a great job, and we're so thrilled to be a part of this. But we are a part of it, and we want to continue to feel like we're a part of it. And so when we read things like that, it seems like, oh, we don't have a say anymore. We don't have a part anymore. We are a body. Each one of us has gifts and things that we desperately want to share, because that's what we're called to do. And we want to honor our leaders. We want to honor the Lord. And thank you so much for how you've led us. But could you kind of give some comfort in future leadership that doesn't exist now as we continue to move forward under what you're proposing?
So I'm going to give you the background, and like I said, this is independent from multiple sources. She was brought in within a few weeks of this meeting of what she just said, and she was screamed at, her and her husband, and now they no longer go to James River by John. So I share that again because I have multiple sources that have confirmed that story to be very accurate. They both share the exact same story, and they have the connection. But that's the type of attitude he had towards people that are sharing, hey, this seems like an overreach. This is too much. This is like, hey, like, we don't think it should all be consolidated with you. I mean, they're seeing the writing on the wall. This is going to a board of people and a handful of people that are now deciding for thousands and thousands of people and people that give of, like I said, time, treasure, prayer, investing in their lives there at James River Church. So this was just heart-wrenching for me to hear how she pleaded, hey, this just seems too much. I love you. I'm so thankful for what you've done, but this is too far. And then to know that she was treated in such a disposable way. Sad. And her story is not alone, by the way.
I would say this, and I think it's important for the congregation. We're never going to take a vote on starting a multi-site. We haven't to this point. We wouldn't. We announce it. Here's again where you have your vote. Here's where you voted on job. People went down there. 100 people went down there. You gave money to help the launch of that. You voted on the West Campus. You gave money to do that. We had 1,000 people go over there. You voted on the North Campus. You 1,000, 1,500 people went over there. You gave money. The congregation votes every single time that the church moves forward. We want to build a church in Basra. You gave money. If you don't want to do that, all you have to do is just not give any money. If you don't want to do project partnership, just don't go to project partnership. Don't want to have the prayer meeting, just don't go to the prayer meeting. I mean, do you follow what I'm saying? What we do is we're going to say, this is the vision God has put us on our heart. But I can tell you this philosophically at James River, other churches will be more committee driven. That's not the way our polity works here. And I mean, so if you're wanting that polity, that's not what this church is. It's not how it's ever run. So if that's what your desire is, then you're asking for something that has never happened. And to say we're going to change and do that would be disingenuous on my part. I'm going to shoot you straight.
So what he just said is patently untrue, right, guys? Because there was a board, right? And he's simply asking for the authority because he has to, right? Presumably. He took more authority than he should anyways, right? We showed that in the resolution 1, but he's asking for the authority that he's claiming we've never had this representative type of way of doing things. That's why you're asking them for this authority, John. Like, it doesn't make sense, and kind of browbeats them. So, like, makes them feel stupid, saying we've never done it that way. We've never had representation. We've never had people voting, and that's what you're doing right now. Everybody in the room is voting. Like, I don't know if it's just me. Am I the only one seeing through this? Is anybody else like seeing this? Please comment. Let me know that you're seeing this so I don't feel so crazy. But he's asking for people to give him more authority to vote, and acting like it's always been the board does everything. It doesn't make any sense. All right. The James River Board was representative despite John's emphatic statement. I've said this before. I shared you guys this story here. There's a couple different people. And this video is really interesting, guys. I called this one out. This was last August. So John was getting some flack from people, I guess, maybe seeing some of the posts I made about, hey, the board is not it's not a board that is a group of people that holds him accountable at all. That's why I was making the points, like the reason the doctrine is not being corrected is the board they don't have that authority, and they're all chosen by him. And so in response to these conversations about the board, he gets up and makes a statement on a Sunday. And you'll see in light of this meeting, again, I bring receipts to what I'm going to say. I don't want to say something and be wrong. If I find I'm wrong, I'll correct it, especially if it's materially wrong. But here we have John. I'm going to show you this video, and everything he says in this next second is a complete violation of this whole meeting. He's going to claim that the board, well, I'll let you just listen to it.
The role of the board has remained the same since the beginning of James Sherver.
So obviously it hasn't, right? We're all watching the board. The role of the board is totally changing. Totally changing. It's what this whole night is about, right? The whole night is about the board, the role of the board changing.
So just want to let you know that about the role of the board has remained this.
There you go. There's the Constitution. The first one there was the bylaws. Now we're changing the Constitution. The role of the board is totally changed. It's totally different. He's saying it's the same. It's remained the same. The role of the board has remained the same. Just a little bit ago, he told us that the role of the board was finances. Now he's telling us because he's not underneath the Assemblies of God. 3 weeks ago, what does he tell us? It's for doctrine. They cover doctrine and character issues and discipline, church discipline. Like they cover all that stuff that the Assemblies of God covered. Now they're going to step in. I've given them new roles, right? The board only did finances. And now, because we're outside of the Assemblies of God, my buddies, the two that are left of the board members, I'm going to tell them, hey guys, please hold me accountable to doctrine. Now that I'm not underneath the Assemblies of God and, all the church discipline, all the leadership, make sure that we're operating like we should with a godly plurality of elders and all the Bible talks about there. I mean, see the nonsense about that? It doesn't make any sense. So let's go back to this, finish it up. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. I'll fast forward it. Don't need to watch the whole thing.
The role of James Sherver. So just want to let you know that about the role of the board has remained the same.
So there's all the different board members and how they were chosen by vote, right? We already know that the board was chosen by vote. Now they're not. So that's a huge change, right? There's two different changes. It's the role of the board, right, is going to be what they can do. That changed this night. And the role changed significantly about how they were picked. So when John says this is it's wild to me, right? If you're going to lie, and you're just totally going to lie to people, you say it convincingly. You say it in a way that, you look them in the eye and you say, hey, the role of the board has been the same since the beginning of James River, right? You just really nail it. And people that trust you just go, okay, cool. I was hearing that, now all the authority is in your hands. You cleared that one up for me. And then what was that, last August? And now we're only a few months later, and now we see, boom, all this evidence is the role of the board was dramatically changed. It used to be picked out by the church. I've proven that. And it now has the authority that they did not have the right to even take away from the church members to rewrite the articles of incorporation, cutting out church members, cutting out the affiliation. This video right here, that's only a few phrases, is one of the biggest lies I've ever seen John tell. And it illustrates how bold he is to do it. Because this whole night, this hour-long deal was all about the articles, the Constitution, the bylaws changing because John wanted them to so he could have power, right? The power that he got from this is insane. And he's violating every ounce of fiduciary duty by not being truthful about what really was behind all this. I said I was going to try to avoid giving you my opinion. I struggled. I at least waited. You had to watch it all the way into like over 2.5 hours in to get my opinion. I reserved it. All right, let's jump back. It's just really hard to watch, guys. I mean, I know that there's a lot of people watching this going, how this is so difficult. It's hard to see so much deception, untruthfulness, double speak, giving reasons that are not really the reasons. And then, like I said, this one, the role of the board has remained the same since the beginning of James River. Just not true. All right, let's finish this up. Hopefully you guys can all get to bed here soon, right? Given the pushback from a few and I've got a few other statements, I'm going to show you that case law. So I know people are sticking around probably for that. So if you're wanting to see the case law that proves everything I'm saying is accurate, I'm not trying to, I don't understand everything all that well, but I'm very confident because of this, and we'll leave it at that. So given the pushback from a few resolution on 2 and 3, right? Think about how much think about how much pushback those people were giving. Diane Hood, Tracy Mitchell, Pam, they were all giving lots of good pushback on these two resolutions because the wording in those resolutions was taking away the voting completely. The wording in Resolution 1, which is the worst one, first of all, they shouldn't have even been voting on it because it wasn't allowed by Article 9. But what do you think the response would have been if they would have known that this Resolution 1 was giving their Articles of Agreement, right? Change, right? So what's a way to phrase this? Sorry, I've got to read what I put. What do you think the response would have been if the voting members would have been made aware by the fiduciary responsibility that John had to the fact that all of the Articles of Agreement were going to be tossed because of Resolution 1? Membership and affiliation tossed, which they, like I said, legally you can't do. So I think that's a pretty easy one to go. I'm going to show you case law. I think that's a pretty easy one for anybody. Assemblies of God, if you're watching, I just did the work for you, and we've got some good input from a couple other people. This is like, we've buttoned it up, okay? So here you have no new campuses equals multi-site justification was a smokescreen. In 2019 meeting, the primary reason for needing board-only constitution control was we're going multi-site and it will be impossible to manage voting and governance across multiple locations in possible states. So that was what he said. The reality check is 0 new campuses. Joplin is the only true remote experience experiment, and even it is still close enough for Springfield for easy oversight. No multi-site expansion, no new governance complexity created by campuses. All right. I don't want to let's see the conclusion here. The multi-site expansion narrative was a false flag. It was not about preparing for decentralized growth. It was about consolidating centralized authority. Translation: they sold the congregation a need to never materialized because it was never the real goal. That's what it feels like, guys. Historical claim here, especially considering they violated their own Articles of Incorporation. I don't think I'd be that bold to say that if they didn't have to violate something that was clear, but there's something nefarious when you violate your own clear Articles of Incorporation. The finances are published every year, right? They used to be. Financial transparency has collapsed. Historically, John claimed the finances are published every year. They're audited. Everything is above board. The reality check is salaries of senior leadership are now completely hidden. Financials that used to be available, even at a basic level, have gone opaque, and no ability for the congregation to review how money is being spent. No ability for members to influence or question financial decisions. So the conclusion, the governance change was about cutting off financial accountability. It definitely did that. Once constitutional and bylaw control was transferred solely to the board, they no longer needed to appease the congregation. They no longer had to fear public disclosure rules enforced through denominational affiliations like AOG. They could pay themselves whatever they wanted, right? I mean, shoot, we don't know how that's going. Authorize financial moves internally and legally keep it private. This fits exactly with megachurch evolution patterns. First, remove oversight, then quietly escalate internal benefits. This is really, if you're wanting to know the purpose, why do this? This isn't really just a kind of push back on John. Although I think there's a lot of people in our community that went to church there that are members, and they've been really their trust is they've been betrayed in this way. But what's the real benefit of this time together tonight is we need to share this with the church as a whole, the Church of Jesus Christ, right? At all of the church. And they need to be aware that this does not end well. We need to have better accountability structures. We cannot remove them. We cannot allow for people to, like I said, I don't care how you do it, but the board has to be independent of the chairman, and the chairman's obviously going to usually be the pastor. So the only way to make them independent is they're voted on by the members, or they're nominated and voted on purely by board members. And I'd say the larger the size, that's going to have to be depending on how many board members you got. I don't think a large church like James River, 2 or 3 is sufficient. You need almost an army of men that can contribute there, right? I mean, you need quite a few. All right. So let's see. I don't really care to read all that. The Great Lie. We will stay accountable. That's what he sold, right? Multiple times said, We will stay accountable. John leadership repeatedly said, we are under the authority. We are accountable to the district and National Assemblies of God leadership. But as you pointed out, when financial data stopped being public, when AOG ties were severed, when no new campuses justified the claim needed for efficiency, it became obvious. The accountability was never intended to be permanent. It was a temporary excuse to get unchecked power. So that's the assumption, right? This is what it looks like. I believe this is some AI that helped us analyze. I had a little bit of help here, but this AI helps analyze the transcript. And so we can see this is kind of an interesting deception here. And so now we have unchecked power. The brutal but true statement: James River Church executed a slow motion corporate takeover of its own body, sold a false need, removed checks and balances, severed external oversight, obscured internal financial practices, concentrated power permanently into the hands of a teeny loyal elite. And I would actually say it concentrated it into John Lindell and his family. The congregation funded their own disenfranchisement without realizing it. It is now corporate religious brand rather than a traditional church with the plurality of elders. Summary: James River leadership openly and repeatedly conveyed that the average member was too numerous, too uninformed, and too disconnected to meaningfully participate in the constitutional governments. The congregation's role should be attendance, giving, and passive support, not legal authority oversight. Governance and financial decisions were better left to small qualified board. Congregational democracy was seen as a relic incompatible with modern megachurch. They were not hiding this view. It was right. It was woven throughout their language, assumptions, and dismissals of every alternative brought up in the meeting. All right, if I kind of race to the end here, here is the case. So you can look it up, guys. This is the Executive Board of Missouri Baptist Convention versus the Missouri Baptist Foundation. So I'll just give you the nuts and bolts of it, and then I'll address a little specifically John Lindell and the behavior component here. But the nuts and bolts of this case is that they did a conversion from a 352 to a 355. They had protections in place for members and oversight from, I believe it was the Missouri Baptist Convention. And this case took 15 years to litigate, guys. 15 years. But the positive thing is that it went to an appeals court that said unanimously, all three of the appellate judges said, this is a cut and dry issue. We see it clearly. Don't know why it's taken this long, kind of thing. Like, this is it. And they basically said you cannot do a change from a 352 to 355. And in that change, dump all of your articles that protected certain entities. You know, in this situation, I believe it was protecting the Baptist Convention and their authority and ownership in some of these assets, right? So think about it this way. The Assemblies of God has, in that Article 4, had really, even though they're a non-for-profit, they had authority over the James River Church assets when that Article 4 was in place. So by 352 to 355, cutting out those unlawfully, cutting out that Article 4, James River Church now violated that responsibility they have to keep that in there. They didn't follow the protocol, and really the reality is the way it was structured, there was really no way out of it. Even with 100% people wanting to leave the Assemblies of God, then the Assemblies of God just gets the property. So the AG, hopefully you're watching. I mean, I think here's the deal. You may not feel like it's necessary, but this is a much bigger church-wide problem, right? If anybody's followed the Second Baptist in Houston, same thing, guys. Go look at that. That's another case. But there's one reason I show this one is because this is Missouri, and one of the appeals judges that wrote the opinion is on the Supreme Court now in Missouri. So this is case law here. It should be, pretty clear for interpretation how our courts in Missouri would handle it. Now, like I said, Second Baptist, it looks to be the same thing. The members are suing for, I want to say it's $84 million to get the assets back from the family that disenfranchised their voting rights. So, anyways, that you can kind of, it's an interesting case if you haven't seen it yet. I think most people have. It's a pretty prominent number of people reported on it. All right, so here's the analysis of the resolution one. It's a 352 convert to 355. So this conversion is where the sloppiness happened, okay? So overview of resolution one, a proposed amendment, revision, and amend. That's the problem, right? You can't amend or restatement of articles of agreement. The objective, transition from 352 to 355. That's what was explained, but we see how it played out. Didn't seem to be the objective. So meeting outcome and unlawful vote. Resolution passed unanimously as recorded in the minutes. No objections raised during or after the meeting because the members were unaware of the articles protecting this vote, right? This would have been something that if the members knew that, hey, wait a second, you're asking us to amend the articles of incorporation? Those are protected. Now, are you talking about all of them? Because it was a blanket statement. Then, yeah, wait a second. What about Article 9? It protects 4. It protects 7. There's no way we can do this. What are we doing voting on this right now? Somebody should have objected, but nobody did because it makes sense that, people don't read the Articles of Incorporation. My dad was on the board at one point, and I asked him, I said, Dad, did you ever read the Articles of Incorporation? He's like, no. Who would? It just seems like that's a lot to go reading all of that. And I don't think a lot of these guys probably suspected that they would need to, but hey, read your Articles of Incorporation. You church boards out there, know them. So articles protecting this vote and unaware that the chairman or the board members who use this to unlawfully erase. Like, that's the thing. Like, we don't know. I think we can all infer, and I'm going to leave that up to you guys, but we can probably infer some people who knew, but I don't know who knew all of this method, right? The membership and affiliation articles and the articles of agreement. So legal concerns, non-compliance with Article 9, would be Article 9, 4, and 7. Required process for amending articles of agreement not followed. Vote deemed unlawful due to procedural violation. Lack of transparency, communication, and the fiduciary duty. Members not fully informed about the legal implications of Resolution 1, right? I covered that pretty clearly. Fraudulent misrepresentation, potential intentional omission of critical details. Well, that's up to you guys to think about what you think there. Lindell's position claims notice requirements and procedural due process were waived, argues it is too late to challenge the vote due to lack of objections. So here's the counter argument. Inadequate disclosure. Members were not fairly informed, undermining the voters' validity, failed to follow Article 9 in the process. The legal precedent is this MBF case. Its court set aside a similar vote, restored Chapter 352 status, and rescinded the Chapter 355 conversion. So that is what happened. Okay, guys? So in the state of Missouri, this case, the court was set aside and restored the 352 status. Proposed action, could request court to invalidate resolution 1 vote, restore original Chapter 352 articles of agreement, and rescind Chapter 355 conversion and articles. So this is all based off of that case law. So that's the possibility. Conclusion, strong basis to challenge resolution 1 due to procedural flaws and lack of transparency. Court intervention, as seen in MBF case, supports potential restoration of original corporate status. Okay, guys, that's important, right? So share with those in the Assemblies of God if you know them, and that case right there should be a good guidance for them. A chairman of the board, chairman of the board behavior. So a chairman of the board fraudulently misrepresenting. So I'm not speaking specifically of John. I'm just saying in general here, guys. I don't want to make any accusations like that, but you can make your inferences off what the evidence has shared. Information and breaching fiduciary duty to consolidate power for personal or family benefit could potentially be considered embezzlement. It's a term I hadn't used tonight, right? But it could be, depending on the specifics. Here's embezzlement generally involves the misappropriation of funds or property entrusted to someone's care, often through fraud or deceit. if the chairman's actions involve diverting nonprofit assets, funds, or opportunities to their family or personal control, this could meet the criteria. So here's the key elements that would be needed. Fiduciary duty breach. As a board chairman, they owe a duty to the loyalty and care of the nonprofit and its members. Misrepresenting facts to manipulate votes for personal gain violates this duty. Fraudulent misrepresentation. Intentionally providing false information to influence the vote could constitute fraud, especially if it leads to personal enrichment or control over nonprofit resources. Whether this qualifies as embezzlement depends on specific actions and evidence. For example, if the chairman manipulates amendments to gain control but doesn't directly take funds, it might be considered a breach of fiduciary duty or fraud rather than embezzlement, unless assets are later misappropriated. There you go. So I wanted to run through this real quick. So I know I've pretty much covered all the audio now, and I just want to kind of finish with a couple final thoughts. So thanks for sticking around if you're still here. But the biblical qualifications to be a pastor, I'm getting tired, my tongue's not working. The Bible outlines qualifications for pastors, right? So often called elders or overseers. And Timothy 1:1-7, and Titus 1:5-9, with additional guidance in 1 Peter. Here is a concise summary. So I wanted to give you this for Here's a concise summary related to ethical conduct, transparency, deception, honesty, power, and greed. Those seem to be all possible things happening in this moment, right? Ethical conduct, transparency was deception, possibly, honesty, not clear, power. Is there control for money, power? What is it? So ethical conduct must be above reproach, living a life of integrity, self-control, and respectability, free from scandal or moral failure. Transparency and honesty must be sober-minded and upright, demonstrating truthfulness and sincerity, avoiding deceitful behavior. It's pretty good. Deception must not be double-tongued. Man, there was a lot of double tongue tonight. Like a lot of speaking out both sides of the mouth. John was pretty guilty of that. I'm going to say pretty objectively guilty of that. Especially in hindsight. Like I said, everything in hindsight is 2020, right? It's a phrase that works because we look back now and we have way more evidence and information. So rejecting manipulation or falsehood. So power must not be arrogant or domineering, right? They shouldn't be arrogant or domineering. So I don't know personally the leaders here, but they must lead humbly, serving as a shepherd, not lording authority over others. So our pastors, they shouldn't be power hungry. They shouldn't be arrogant, domineering. They should lead humbly. They shouldn't, serve as a shepherd, not lording authority. Greed. They must not be a lover of money. It's an interesting thing. You shouldn't. I forget who says this. It might be Steve Kosar, but you should not go to be a pastor to get wealthy. That is a absolutely silly endeavor. You'll instantly find yourself in immense amount of sin. So must not be a lover of money or greedy for gain, prioritizing spiritual service over personal profit. There's the scripture to support that. These qualifications emphasize a pastor's character, requiring ethical, transparent, and honest leadership that stewards authority humbly and rejects greed or deception. All right, question and answers coming up, guys. So what should the church do? Oh, and you guys are being patient because I'm just reading. You're having to look at my face. I thought I had this all up there. So, I'll throw up that so you can see the scriptures. All right. Maybe you can screenshot and pause it. Those who missed it, sorry. Hopefully I didn't do that for the last too many slides. All right. So what should the church do with this information? I think I said this is really a broad church issue. My hope and prayer from this is this goes far beyond Springfield and James River Church. This is, I'm going to be on the Ohio for Freedom podcast. Excited to be on there on Thursday. And then obviously we're going to continue with our out of context Christianity. Laura and I once a month, we'll be announcing that where we'll just tackle things we've learned that were out of context. And another thing to say here, by the way, if you are not going to church at James River anymore, my prayer is you will find a church. It breaks my heart when I hear of some people that have not been in a church for a long time. God wants you to be in fellowship with other believers. You need it. We all need the accountability. We need to have the discipleship, the relationship. We need to use our gifts. God's given us gifts to use. The Holy Spirit enables us to do that. So you really, really are doing yourself and you're doing the kingdom a disservice by not being regularly in church. So I wanted to say that. So what should the church do with this information? Well, we need to get this out, guys. We need to say, you know what? We're done with this. Churches that I want to see the bylaws of churches. I want to know how they're run, right? I want to make sure that we're structuring things in a way that, we don't have to have this same look everywhere. It doesn't have to be, like I said, everybody's voting. Every last person that goes to church is voting. That might be overdone, but there needs to be some representation from a plurality of elders, and preferably many. 2 or 3 is not enough. You need, especially a larger church. If your church is super small, maybe that's plenty. But as you grow, you need to have more and more input. It's just healthy. By not creating healthy churches, we are going to constantly see this rear its ugly head. James River Church will not, and Second Baptist and MFB, the case I just showed you, or MBF, whatever it is, this is just going to keep repeating itself. And it's really sad because it hurts so many people. There's lots of church hurt here, lots of people having to find new homes to go worship, and it creates so much friction and division and heartache. It's got to stop. And we're people calling this out, like myself and countless others, they're not the problem, right? It's the removing accountability and centralizing this leadership, and what it does, especially the nepotism component. That's involved often, but it's involved also in this Houston issue. So if you get a chance, look that one up. All right. So question and answers, guys. I'll take them. I hopefully you guys are throwing them in now. Let me see. I got it. Dude. I'll take them for a little bit. I know it's getting late, but maybe I'll take 15, 20 minutes of questions. Make sure that if anything I wasn't clear on. So sorry if you guys have already asked them and I missed them, but so Q&A, throw them up there. Is there anything that wasn't clear? Do you think James River Church, let's put that in there. There you go. Do you think James River Church will begin to import their parishioners rather than draw from local area? I don't know. That's a good question. I think that's an interesting one. I don't know that one. Oh, do the current board members get paid? I don't think so, Ryan. I don't know for certain, but I do not believe I've ever. I know they didn't used to. So I'd be shocked if they are now. Yeah, so James River changed their name in 2015. And the claim there is that I think they wanted to have more people think about them and be open to coming. Awesome. Thanks for answering the questions in the chat, Don. Appreciate your help, brother. Let's see. Any other questions? I'll hang on for just a few more minutes here and make sure anybody's got questions from what I shared tonight. I think hopefully it was helpful, educational, edifying. Hopefully I didn't get to see the chat. Hopefully it stayed pretty, clean and not too aggressive and hateful. I know, like I said, people that I'm sure those that have watched this and maybe you're seeing this for the first time, you're going to be battling with this issue with anger, right? I know that's been an issue of mine. I've been watching this play out and looking at the evidence, and it really frustrates you. But I'd encourage you to, not let yourself lose control. It's okay to be upset and frustrated. I'd say even angry at sin and deception. It shouldn't make any of us. I mean, if you're just okay with this and walking right by it, that's way more concerning. But don't sin in your anger. let's be truthful. Let's not be slanderous, right? Slanderous is really when you're making up stuff and exaggerating the components. So, all right. Do I know the salaries of the Lindells? No. And even if I did, I wouldn't share it. But yeah, I do not. Do you think the AG will take control of the court and head court? I just don't know, right? I mean, that's going to be entirely up to them. I'd say they've been pretty passive so far. That could always change. Kind of sad to see. What would be one of the reasons to talk about this, right? Nobody else wants to seem to talk about it because it's too messy, right? It's too you're going to take heat for it, and it seems divisive. It's not divisive. The behavior you saw that Wednesday night, when we look back and we see what it's done to James River Church, that, my friend, is divisive. No one calling this out, pointing it out, studying it, trying to figure out what kind of trickery happened. That's myself and anybody else. They're not divisive. Truth seekers, gatekeepers, people watching, those are not the ones that are dividing. It's a good example is like if you're on a up top shining a spotlight down on something just horrific, sin. Let's just say something like this, like just deception, something that just didn't play out right. It shouldn't be right. Well, rather than, what's interesting is some people will go, look at the guy shining the spotlight, and they'll want to run and tackle you as you're going, hey, this is wrong. Look at this, right? That makes no sense to me. Why would we do that? Why do we as a church act like people that are discerning and figuring out these violations in behavior and attitude and some of it unlawful operations with their articles of incorporation to disenfranchise members and the Assemblies of God? That's how in the world is anybody pointing that out being divisive? Division is caused around deception and not the true gospel, not speaking truth. That's all division. So when somebody says, "Hey, you're being divisive," you remind them, "Hey, if you're telling if you're going out and trying to create trouble, that's not necessary." But you get my point. Let's see, a couple other questions. How do you think this relates to what happened at Mars Hill? I'm not familiar enough there, Jack, with Mars Hill to give you much of an educated response, so I'm going to kind of hang out of that one. I know that there's a good podcast, right, and there's all that information. I haven't studied it. This one I studied enough to really feel confident in the analysis, and it wasn't just my study, by the way. I had a lot of great help, and that's another thing too. This was confirmed among 8. I've had 8 Assemblies of God pastors private messaging me. Many of them. I've had past board members. I've had hundreds of people that went to church there, upset, frustrated, saying, "Hey, thanks for saying something about this. We're really brokenhearted." I mean, so yeah, this is something that is happening quite broadly. Yeah. Any change to the board head? Yeah. All right. Make sure. Yeah. What steps? This is good. Not a question, but what next steps would you encourage everyone listening to take prayer? Obviously, I would pray that we would encourage our brothers and sisters in Christ to seek out churches that have good accountability structures and get planted there and serve and worship regularly and make sure that the gospel is presented regularly. When I say the gospel, I mean, all of it, that we're sinners all the way from, God's holy and we can't partake in any communion with him because of our sin. And that aspect is really oftentimes left out in the modern hyper growth churches. Because, hey, you don't want to tell people they're sinners all the time, but it's the foundation of our faith, right? We need to have a foundation of God's holiness, our sin, giant gap, like huge gap, our sin, God's holiness. How do we span that gap? It's Jesus Christ. The bigger that gap, which it's immense, for both reasons. God's so holy and our sin is so awful compared, that the only way to span that gap is Christ's sacrifice for us on the cross. So we need to be telling that story over and over in our churches, and we can't get tired of it. So there's some I'd encourage, Todd. So where do we go from 7 to 5? I'm not sure when that happened. All right. Want to make sure I answer all your questions. I know there's still quite a few people on. Yeah, righteous anger. I get it. Yeah, when you're seeing something that's so kind of out of bounds behavior. Like I said, when John sits there and says the role of the board is the same since the beginning of James River, and you're just going, how does he sit there and say that so straight-faced and so convincingly? I mean, I have an example real quick. That to me is an example of pathologic lying. It's just like, how do you say it so clear, so confident, and it's such a big lie. I knew this person, and I was riding in their car, and I just had met them. I didn't know them very well, and they were riding with someone else. And we go into park, and she nailed the curb, destroyed the bumper. Like, he was like, no, it is a brand new car. Then she walks inside and says to her husband, somebody just backed into me at the parking lot over at the store. Complete lie. And I'm like, and the way she said it, I'm like, and I just had met her, right? So I'm like, uh-oh, watch out for this person. How did she just do that? Like, all of us, I would hope the Holy Spirit living in us would convict the tar out of us if we were able to just point, I'm just lie and just move right along. And so convincingly, John saying that and go out there and saying the board's the same since the beginning of James River and being so deceptive in that statement. I don't know how he did it. It's crazy. Did you invite AG officials at state, national level to tune into this? You know what? I've called them out repeatedly because I've tagged them and I've used their names, hoping that friends would tell them. So I would hope that they would be watching, and I'm sure this will be shared with them. Yeah, it's good. Somebody asked the same question. Thanks, Trisha. Do you see? Do I see a fall? I don't know. I mean, I'm not wanting one. I'm really not. I'd rather them be restored, but it's the hole they've dug to restore is ridiculous. All the lies about the toes, Alex Magala, Mark Driscoll. I mean, I've documented it. It's like, come on, stop doing this, fix it. Come on, I'm publicly correct. You're trying to call out your sin because it's public sin. It goes back to what we started with, right? I get a lot of criticism for why are you so critical? Well, it's loving. It's not loving. It's absolutely the opposite of loving to watch someone who claims to be a brother in Christ just overtly sin, and then no one calls accountability. I pray that I never have my friends who love me and know that I'm a Christian watch me live out public sin or even private sin. Like, please, any of my friends, you know me. If I'm doing something that you think is sinful, I would beg you to tell me. I would rather correct my heart and not live in sin. All right. Has the attendance, Jared? I don't know. I'm sure. Here's the problem with the itching ears doctrine. If you're telling everybody that it's always God's will to heal, right? I mean, and if you had enough faith, he'll heal you on earth, which is the doctrine they teach. And the kenosis from issues with, Jesus didn't perform any miracles as God. He performed them all as man. So that, therefore, if we had enough of the Holy Spirit in us, we can do what Jesus did. That nonsense, right? That is a very itchy ears doctrine. It's repeated itself. The Assemblies of God warned about this back in the Latter Rain movement, 1940s. But John Lindell praised the Latter Rain movement about a year ago, and I have video of that. And I'm like, what in the world? The Assemblies of God said this was a mess. And you're praising it, and it's because of the false doctrine they taught and acting like it's always God's will to heal, and there's no room for suffering on this side of heaven. And what kind of Jesus would ever allow us to suffer? That's not good. Yeah. So I think there'll always be itching ears, right? So for every person who goes, you know what, I'm done with that kind of doctrine. I don't want to be involved. I don't want my kids learning about prosperity gospel at 14 years old that they can, if they become a Christian, they're going to get everything. They're going to get the keys to the kingdom and get everything. So you're going to want to leave and go, I'm getting outside of that. Now there's no accountability structure. But there's always going to be people coming in for it too, right? I mean, when Bill Johnson comes, people come in hopes that because he's there, they're going to get healed. That's crazy. God can heal you in your living room with two people. You're praying for yourself and maybe somebody else praying for you, right? God does heal, and that's all. That happens, and he doesn't need Bill Johnson or John Lindell to heal. Can contacting the state. Well, so I would wonder on that, right? It seems like there should be some input from like an attorney's general, but I'm not advocating for everybody to go be a police officer here. I think the truth here is really the biggest deal. And I think there's definitely some parties like church members and the Assemblies of God. Primarily, the Assemblies of God was huge, like cost wise, they were robbed, right? When I say John is a thief, I don't just say that lightly. I get that that's a pretty bold statement, but the way that things operated with the Article 4 being removed and unlawfully doing it, and then claiming the assets of James River Church now to be his, which they weren't with Article 4 in there, that's a real interesting one, right? So it seems a legality issue, does. Yeah, let's see. Any other questions? I still got quite a few on here. You all should be going to bed. What are you doing? I'll try to finish the questions. Staff is not allowed to say anything. We are required to sign. Yeah, that's so true, right? The staff is forced to sign NDAs. If you guys didn't know that, anybody that's let go at James River, they're forced to sign NDAs for money, a severance check, basically. And if they don't get the severance check. And they make it sizable enough. So think about it. Your tithe money, if you're tithing at James River, some of your funds are going to pay large severance checks for non-disclosure agreements. That's not good. Yeah. So, and Stephen, when you say this, I want to be clear. They really didn't. Okay. So this is the ruse. You said, and I get why you said it, because they were talking about the voting the way the rights on that article on the Constitution and bylaws, but the articles of agreement, there was no understanding that that's what they were doing. They didn't know. Like, think about it, guys. If John Lindell and the board walked into that meeting and said, "Hey, by the way, tonight, our goal is that you're going to be voting on the articles of incorporation, the Constitution, the bylaws, and by the end of the night, you will no longer be members, and we're going to disaffiliate, or we're going to remove the affiliation clause from the articles of incorporation." That would be fiduciary responsibility and transparency, right? How many people would have voted for any of that, right? No one would have voted for that. So, now you're getting more of my opinion, but no one would have voted for anything that happened that night if 100% transparency, honesty was in advance. Even like I said, that resolution 1 was a joke. Shouldn't have even been put out there. But if they were even transparent about what they were going to do with it, nobody would have voted for it. And then you have to ask yourself, did they know that? Did they know that nobody would have voted for what they were asking if they phrased it in a way? Or did the board or Kurt or John or who else, the attorney, how much did they know? What were what was their motivation? What was the end game for them? How far down the road were they seeing? But they manipulated that moment. There's plenty of deception this night. And namely that resolution 1, just giant deception. Even though it shouldn't have been up for vote, it got unanimous vote. Why did it get unanimous vote? Why do you think the church voted unanimously? Yay! It was all ayes, right? No nays. So why was that? Because they thought they were helping take it from a 352 to 355, right? Think about all the people that stood up to a mic and objected for the Constitution and the bylaws. If they had any clue of what Article 1 was, that Resolution 1, they would have been all over that mic going, wait a second, we're not rewriting the Articles of Articles of Incorporation to remove us as members and not being able to be a part of that affiliation. So you see what I'm saying? They really didn't vote away all their rights. They were manipulated into giving some authority to the board, is what I'd say, right? The church members were told on resolution 2 and 3, hey, here's some authority to the board because we need it. We need to be more agile for the multi-site. We can't quite get all of you guys together for the Constitution and bylaws. That's what was sold to them. And that sounds okay, especially if you say stuff like, we're over the next year, we need to be able to make these changes. So you're thinking, I mean, even that kind of makes you go, oh, this might be just part-time. Maybe I'll get some say here in a year or two, right? It's just, I know that you got to think deeper than that, but think about it from this perspective. It's a pastor you trust, right? If it's a pastor you trust and he's somebody you look up to as your spiritual guidance, you're open for it, man. You don't see things as clearly. It's not as transparent. And so it's easier to be deceived for sure. Yeah, they're tax exempt. Yep. All right. Are you able to speak to any changes in leadership direction? Describe the church pre-post. I don't want to just conjecture there. I'm not sure what the leadership direction will be. I mean, he said in 2027 he'll hand over the church to David and Brandon. But that's a whole other topic, by the way, guys. I mean, you usually just the idea of just handing it over to your kids without the church's input or a board doing some sort of exploratory work is kind of that's really odd. That turns our churches into a legacy system, right? Handing it down to the latest and next kids. All right, guys. Any other questions about specifically tonight? You guys are doing great. Lots of questions on here. Lots of statements, not a ton of questions. All right. I'm going to give it just another few minutes here. Make sure I didn't miss any of these. All right. Well, guys, thanks for sticking it out. I hope, like I said, I threw it together since Saturday. I got it Saturday afternoon. So, it's about as clear as I could make it in that short amount of time. And I appreciate I had a number of help from some phenomenal individuals. So, yeah. Yeah, do I see John ever admitting this? Here's the deal, right? I think this is important. Initially, the church was like, "Hey, John, don't go down this path of Bill Johnson. It's not a good idea," right? He even had a whole Wednesday night sermon where he tried to say, I've checked all his books, grave soaking, all this stuff, no big deal. Bill Johnson's great. Like, you guys are wrong. Don't send me any videos, right? So, that was a pause for me. I'm like, I don't know, man, this is bad. He should be doing some more research on his own and not buying into this. So then it's a matter of, okay, how do we get John to realize this is going doctrinally is the wrong direction? Especially when he tells you don't bother emailing me, and then rejects contacts, even though I've been confrontational, but at the same time, it's confrontation to try to correct in a way that I think has evidence. And even, like I said, the evidence comes from even the position papers on the Assemblies of God website, right? The Assemblies of God website has position papers that call what John has taught as deviant teaching disapproved. So that's what they call it. They just don't stand firm on it, obviously, for whatever reason. I won't maybe assume why. But my point is at first it becomes, hey, John, come on, get back on track. Teach the Bible the way you've always taught it. You don't need to rely on Bill Johnson for teaching. And then because he wants this healing so bad, it becomes overt sin. So it becomes lying about the toes and then doubling, tripling, quadrupling down. I don't know how many times he's lied about the toes, but every time he mentions the toes, it's a bold-faced lie. It's 100%. I've seen both photos. I've shared it. The evidence is there. It's a silly lie. I mean, but it's a bold one, and it's proclaimed, to the whole nation on their website and on their YouTube channel. So my point is then you're like, okay, now, come on, correct this overt sin. Don't lie for God. God can heal, but you don't have to lie for him. And I think it starts off with doctrine, calling out a public sin. Hey, come on, repent. Like if you watched some of my first videos a year ago, it was like, John, just repent, set the record straight, fix it, do what you advised everybody else to do that made mistakes. And I don't know, pride, we could all just assume pride, or maybe he just doesn't want to have any correction, or doesn't think he's wrong at all. Maybe that's it. But then after that, right, it becomes, well, goodness, people are following this man and he's teaching false doctrine and he's overtly sinning. He's got the bad fruit. Especially people that I love and I've asked to go there. So I want to warn them and I want to try to get now let's tell the church, let's try to really get them to be aware, like, hey, you might want to be cautious here. This guy's going down a path that maybe you don't want to go down with him. So to answer your question, I know it's a little long-winded, but we're long past where it would have been much easier for John to admit. That's my answer to your question. It would have been hard to admit to begin with. But now it's getting super hard. My advice early on was to tell John, I said, I even made a video and I said, man, think about how healing this could be. This is national news about this Mark Driscoll thing. You were wrong. You made this Wednesday video. It was a mess. You called him out. You totally filleted him in front of millions of people because you posted the video and paid for, the video I played at the beginning was him paying for ads. So fly him back out to Springfield, Missouri, get him on stage, apologize, set the record straight. Say, Mark, I was wrong. I treated you unfairly. We could have handled that solution at the men's conference better for sure. But me to go on stage on Wednesday and just totally lose my cool and say things that were untrue is wrong. So, that would have been hard then is what I'm getting at, Regina. But now we're talking about, I don't know, the humble pie you have to eat to correct unrepentant sin you've just decided to live in. The Holy Spirit can do it. I mean, I believe God can do anything. So it's not beyond possibility. I would pray he would watch video. I mean, maybe he's watching this now. I'd pray, John, that you would decide what's more important, right? Pride or realizing you've been unrepentant and uncorrectable. And by the way, it's not Grant Olson. I'm the voice, maybe. I mean, I've been maybe the loudest voice, but this isn't just Grant Olson. And you can make it about me. But that's just wrong. It should be about the topics, and there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of discernment ministries and people out there have warned and called this out and said, hey, don't go there. It's bad. It's dangerous. So like I said, it's not just me. All right. I know you got 320 on. You guys are amazing. 320 people still on. And I'm like, I'm falling asleep in here. I don't have surgery tomorrow, so I can stay a little bit here, but I'm not going to lie. I'm getting a little hungry. I haven't had dinner. So yeah. All right. Any other question? Article 4. So Article 4 was the one that protected if you go back towards the beginning, it was the affiliation article with the Assemblies of God. It required 100%. Well, it had required Article 9, which was going to give all these stipulations of 60-day notification to amend Article 4. And Article 4 said if 100% of the church wants to leave the Assemblies of God, you got to hand the property over to the Assemblies of God. If 20% or 20 people want to stay, those 20 that want to stay, they get to keep the property. So basically, Mario, it's like you're not getting out of the Assemblies of God with the property, right? Which John just did. That's why I'm saying when I say John's a thief, he couldn't have gotten the property without getting outside of that Article 4. It was impossible. So how did he do it? Well, I believe the evidence, and I'm confident, not just on my own, have talked to counsel that this is unlawful. That resolution 1 vote was not even. It started off on the complete wrong foot. All right. Anything else? Yeah, exactly. Who wants to talk about bylaws and constitution? I agree. Adam says that. Yeah. All right. Sorry, guys. I'm just reading. Now go to sleep. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Yeah, it was framed as just a simple change. All right. All right, guys. I'm going to go ahead and say good night. Yeah, I'm thirsty. I've taken a few sips of water here, Fred. It's funny. Fred goes, "Are you thirsty?" Yes. Can we do a feature? Yes. So, Lauren and I'm gonna try. Matter of fact, I'll ask this question in this live since we have 320 people on here. So we're gonna do this out of context Christianity. My wife and I thought it'd be a lot of fun. We love the Word of God. We love trying to be truthful with it, and forget about our opinions, but go to Scripture and try to really get things that have been taught out of context in context. And we all should be trying to do that. And so this idea of kenosis, how scriptures that are used out of context to support such a aberrant teaching. I mean, it's literally kenosis is the same thing that got Eve. So yes, we'll be doing this, but I'm going to ask you guys, what nights would be best? Not that it's going to make or break our decision, but just out of curiosity, I'm kind of curious what evenings, because we're going to do it once a month, I think. So that's kind of the goal. All right. But yes, Ryan, I really want to do it. So first one we're going to do, I think, Ryan, is going to be over faith, because it's such a butchered word in churches, right? Faith is so often used as just belief in an outcome that we want on planet Earth, and that is not faith. This is not biblical faith. So we need to properly define faith, right? That's a big deal if we're teaching people that if we're not teaching the wrong way to define faith. I lost it. I was lost your question. Oh. Let's see. I think I almost got through all your questions, guys. I think I got it. You're typing them faster than I can get there. Go eat and get some rest. Thanks. Appreciate it, guys. All right. All right, guys, put some days in. Thank you. All right, y'all. Thanks for your time, and thanks for all the comments, encouragements. Let's pray for our local churches. Let's pray for James River Church, John and Debbie. Pray that there would be some change of heart here and correction. Only God can perform that miracle, right? We're not going to be able to change anybody's mind, but we can be truthful, we can be prayerful, and we can share the gospel with our community and our friends and family, and make it the central topic of our churches too. So anyways, God bless. Thanks so much for your time, guys. Bye.